Good afternoon. I'm Counselor Dee Knutson, and we're going to resume our annual budget hearings today. And thank you so much for being here with us and for watching live on Channel 16. This afternoon, we're going to start, first of all, with our Health Department, and our Director of Health, Judy Boozman, will lead off. Thank you.
Thank you. She just said I was Judy Boozman. I'm used to always saying that first, so I'll just dispense with that. As we look at the first health slide, this is just a reminder that our new building is coming online today, and it's still also for a budget presentation, it's still important to recognize that 50% of the budget as far as maintenance and facilities was come online this year, but that also will affect our budget next year as we have a full year of paying for that within the health budget. You know, Jean's already done that overview, and just this will identify that the health budget is roughly 6.5% of the general fund. In that, we have a contribution of about 60% of our revenues that we generate do cover our expenses within the health department, and we'll look at that a little closer also. Mission statement for the health, and I'm not going to read through every word on the slide, but I think it's important just as we look at this as really safeguarding the health of the Sioux Falls community. And we also like to identify that we're going to use science or evidence-based practice. So that as we look at our prevention, our detection, all of our surveillance methods, we're looking for best practice or the science of whatever we do at this point in time. These things are, quality of life as we look at neighborhoods and the effect on neighborhoods. They're also quality of life for the medical patients that we serve. Roughly right now we're serving about 9,000 medical patients. We look at the health and safety aspects as we look at preparedness, and there's been significant changes in the preparedness issues over the last 10 years. We compare the health budget 2007 to 2008. See that revenues are up about 18.1%, and again, then expenditures are up about 14.8% for a net change to the general fund of $126,297,000. And we'll focus on where those particularly expenditure changes and where those revenue changes are coming as we move through each personnel services. Then, as we look to the next slide. Personnel services are up 12.6%, and one of the impacts that I know was brought out last night at hearings with Human Services is particularly to the Community Health Center, and that's where we have new staffing positions. We have new staffing positions in 07 as we look, and in 08, 4 in 07 and 2 in 08. So those, again, we'll identify those a little more specifically as we get programmatically. The non-personnel expenditures are up 18.3%, and those are really, at this point, mostly grant-driven, and I will identify the specifics of where those go. And so as we have that total expenditure budget up at 14.8%. But most of that is new revenues. As we look at the different grants, we've got some that are short-term, some that are long-term that are coming online in 08. From a programmatic standpoint, again, looking at the Community Health Center, it comprises about 55% of the health budget. If we look also, though, closely related to the Community Health Center are the refugee and the HIV programs. And the refugee program and the HIV are really internal programs. They become programmatic because they're both grant and contract driven, so that we like to call them individual programs because it makes it easier to track those funds, to identify those expenditures, and should those contracts or grants go offline, we can deal with those in a very expedient basis. The dental component, which we also often talk about as a sector, is really part of the Community Health Center grant. And I think the interesting thing as we look at this is environmental health comprises about 19% of our budget. If we look specifically programmatically, again, you can see there's a change from 07 in administration. Some of that is grant driven as we're getting on a new preparedness grant online. There's also changes as we look at preparedness that's having a significant impact on it. We've had a preparedness team that has been comprised of people from across all divisions, but much of that has been in the Community Health Center. We need to do some staff realignment now. I'll identify that as we move through those programs. So that is some of the change. We've also had a change in REMSA staff that we had a REMSA contracted staff that has now become an appointed staff member. So that's increasing the, some of the overall expenditures in the administrative area. So we move then to the what those major budget changes are and what they look like. Like I said, the move to the Health and Human Services building, we are having our first full year for maintenance, and instead of maintenance being part of facility maintenance, it's actually in our budget because we pay that as a contract through the cooperative agreement to facility to the facilities maintenance area over at the county. One of the things that has increased that a little bit is also the maintenance for the parking lot is also incorporated in that, and that was not anticipated, so that's why we're a little more than 50% higher in that particular area. The expansion grant for the Community Health Center is a grant that is coming on board. It is requiring outreach services. It's to be too focused, both for families and for homeless folks in the community. And it will, right now, like I said, we're hiring positions at both this time. I think one of the major pieces is as new grants come on and as we hire folks that are grant funded, even the contracted staff, they know that if this grant goes away, their positions all go away. We've had that experience already in, I think it was about 2002, where we had a grant that was no longer functioning. We've had that experience with other contracts. Sometimes those staff members are permanent and are regular staff members. Sometimes they're contracted staff. Sometimes that's temp staff. As we utilize temp staff positions for grants that we know are going to be term ended. So the cooperative agreements for the mosquito control are also a change in our budget, and why that doesn't sound like should be a change, but the difference is that this year we're actually putting the Minnehaha and the Lincoln County agreements, the budgeted funds, in the budget. Before, if you remember, we've done budget adjustments for those, but the cooperative agreement for Minnehaha is now a perpetual agreement. It remains in the it remains in place. We may do some budget adjustments and change that, you know, and as an adjustment factor. And we're also making that change with Lincoln, so that we're planning on those so that from forward they would be into the budget. As I mentioned, the increased responsibilities on preparedness. We've done 2 staff realignments that have affected administration and in the environmental health, where you saw some specific jumps. Sandy Friends, who has been in front of you talking about our preparedness planning, has been doing a significant amount of work around community readiness. I think, if you remember her talking about how to do points of dispensing around the community for antibiotics and vaccine, she really coordinates that for us, as well as coordinating then part of our environmental health department, the mosquito control, and some other vector-borne kinds of issues. So as we see that change, one of the things that has really affected us is the fact that Sioux Falls is a tertiary medical center. The health community looks to us to help coordinate and be that communication hub for the region. And along with what we call that, what I would identify that normal channel that we always hear from the city to the county to the state up to the federal and FEMA, within the healthcare area, they have started to look at health resources, not just public health, but health resources of hospitals and healthcare through a regional system. And that coordinates through the State Department of Health. So we actually have 2 planning divisions that are, you know, in a sense channels, although you could almost count from local to county to state and then still at national planning pieces. Those aren't something that we necessarily ask for, but they become a expectation even of the CDC. The grant I've talked about with community readiness isn't one we applied for. It was basically directed from the State Department of Health down through us. It's a pass-through grant. So these are responsibilities that come, some of because of who we are, becomes the economic channel as we look at the healthcare industry that's within our community. Just one more illustration on preparedness. Right now we're dealing with about 10 to 14 drills per year where our health preparedness or our public health manager is expected to be there to talk and work with those health piece because, of course, right now pandemic flu is such an emphasis. So if we look at those budget differences, right now we have about $927,000 of additional expense, $800,000 plus of additional revenue. In 2008, we have the 2 positions, although part of that additional expense is the 4 positions that are coming on board in 2007. And then the carryover of additional expense within the CIP budget. Those are best illustrated here now on this slide. As you can see, that what we had, the 2007 budget for our utility and facilities maintenance in the new building was about 73. So if we had just doubled that, it would look more like 150,000. As we have had the experience, we've looked at utility bills, add all the snow removal and the parking lot issues, that has gone up, at least in our current projections. If we don't need that much, but those would be the best projections right now of facilities management at the county as to what we will experience. The medical capacity grant is $525,000 of new revenue. We had an additional boost to the 2007 budget of $222,000, and then the cooperative agreements I mentioned, those are now for the two counties. This would be additional revenue, what was in the 2000 budget compared to the $230,000 roughly in the 2008 budget. And that community readiness grant, now that will probably be somewhere around a 3-year grant. But right now that rests administratively within the it rests within the administration sector. Some of the staff required for that certainly still come from the other sectors. As I mentioned, Sandy Friends used to be in the Community Health Center, but we've moved her since it's become a full-time position and actually additional, just the coordination, we've moved that out of the Community Health Center because as far as we were subtracting that kind of dollars from our Community Health Center grant, so it's just easier to track that outside of the Community Health Center. And so and plus we added some other responsibilities with that position also then, so that we felt we were better utilizing her time. From a programmatic change, as we list that, again, from a health administration, we're looking at those community-based interventions and preparedness. Right now, we have a real focus on the planning for pandemic health and the community readiness. In 2008, we'll be targeting that we're going to be looking at beyond just the very large local vaccine and distribution points. We're going to create some what we call closed, so that we don't need quite so many volunteers. We have some organizations with certainly the healthcare organizations, but we have some places like a Citibank or Morels where they have some ability to distribute. But for us, that is a tremendous amount of organization. We have to have the education in place so that they can hand it out. We have to have the distribution, so they will be creating those distribution processes during 2008. We will also be looking at a broader community assessment of how well prepared we are for that pandemic flu. And I always say to people, when you say pandemic flu, we're really talking about any sort of major infectious disease process. It's just that pandemic flu is the broadest you can think about and the worst scenario. So as we talk to businesses and in the community, we'll be also doing some education around that, identifying how their plans are coming together. From the community health center's focus, again, we're looking to reduce the health and give high quality care to people who don't have good access. The real focus is going to be that grant. They're going to have, even though we start that work in 2007, it'll be really, the anticipation is that we'll add 2,000 users over 2 years. So this will still carry over for us into 2009 because as we start to work with new populations, there's outreach, there's education, and that's why we've also set up for that new staff to come on board in a staggered process. We've identified a hiring process at least over 6 months. It may take longer if we don't have if we're still not needing it in the clinic, we won't be hiring it until we actually have to have that. So there'll be a real partnership that's developed with the schools, because over the last 3 years we've spent some significant discussions with the administration at the school system. Right now, there's 31% of our kids in school, K through 12, that are eligible for free and reduced lunch. That's up to 185% of poverty. That's a staggering number. I've been in, actually it was a Rotary Club that said, oh, they must be wrong. And this statistic doesn't come from me. This comes from the school system. You can get their website. Pam Homid would tell you those exact same statistics. And I think that's a shock to us in our community to think that, but these are, and particularly we look at grade schools where we have roughly 8 grade schools, and it varies because kids move around a lot, that have 50 to 75% of their kids at that statistic. So I think, that they're at free and reduced lunch. So I think as we think about our community, this is the same sector that, doesn't have insurance then, or many of them don't have insurance. And as they are in our community, this is why expanding particularly with schools where they congregate, where we can outreach to them, and the school system has really been eager to partner. It's why I feel that generating the revenue is very viable, because those kids are eligible for CHIPS. And probably in those same schools where we look at the reports where 25 to 30% of those kids do not have a primary medical home. And that's what the outreach will facilitate doing. Just a quick illustration then, one of the, as we look at, I've said before about the community health center is that it's staff limited. In the last 4 years, you can see we've had a moderate growth of roughly just 900 users to the community health center, and we've had, but the visits haven't changed very much, and that would be what we'd call an efficiency tactic. And the efficiency would be what we do max packing. If we have somebody in here, we look for everything that they should be caught up on. That might be immunizations, if it's diabetics. We're using then for we're testing out and tracking our outcomes for those kind of clients, and seeing if it makes a difference. Does it make a difference if we see diabetics 3 times a year or 4? We can see more patients, and that's basically what we've done. We've been able to increase by patients and not significantly change our visits, because a physician and nurse team can only see so many patients in a day. You can also look down below. It just illustrates the number of our percent of patients that are uninsured as they come in, which would also, we think, designate that we're certainly getting to the target audience as we need to. So we look at environmental health. In our environmental health sector, we really are looking to utilize national and state standards for surveillance as we minimize threat of food and vector-borne illness. We do that through code compliance, looking at food services. Our action plan for 2008 is to really look at our food code. We've sectored it in 2 sectors, and we'll be bringing and updating and revising parts of that. We're maintaining the mosquito control process, and then one of the things that we're quite proud of, remember in 2006 we put our restaurant scores or all facility inspection scores online, and we're maintaining at those scores at almost 90% or actually we're above the 90%, above 85. It's closer to 90% above 90. It just falters depending on, once in a while. So we have very good food handlers here in Sioux Falls, and we should be very proud of that. It's one of those things you don't lay out to staff, though, to say we want them to be at that, because there's that false, you don't want them to be saying, okay, we've got to achieve that. But it's been very evident as we look at our web scores. Environmental health stats, just to give an illustration of change over the last 4 years. Facility numbers have increased. Again, it looks at 100, but as we look at the inspections on those, and this would be only the required inspections. So anytime inspectors have to go back because of 3-day or 30-day checks, those aren't counted in here. This would just be the once or twice a year that are required inspections. Nuisance, and the top number is the facility, the lower number is the inspections, and on nuisance cases, it's the same illustration. So as we look at those individuals, the number of inspections can be identified, and most, all of those inspections in food facilities are roughly an hour. Some of the larger are longer than that, and the other inspections, but people are usually making somewhere between 5 to 7 inspections a day, even if you count those short ones. I know that it doesn't look like it here, but that's why they need the short checks at either nuisance or the facilities. Those aren't counted. This is really just the required first and last inspections. Property cleanups have also gone up during this same period of time due to renewed code compliance efforts. Quick look at the laboratory. We're looking at the clinical support for water testing to local businesses, really to be responsive for intracity services, and we do some public and private. Sometimes those beaches that we hear are closed it's because of the local testing. This provides a 24 or 48-hour service locally rather than having to ship that off and the handling to pier. So just kind of to I did leave the refugee piece in here real quickly just to give you an overview, just in case you don't know what that program does. We're really looking at, I look at that one as targeting for global threats. As we are a major refugee center, we're screening those individuals as they come into the community, and usually we're looking at medicine that is, a major change for these folks, and we've found some new and interesting diseases and things to treat here in Sioux Falls. Our physicians are getting quite accustomed to looking for something beyond the norm in Sioux. If we look at potential performance measures, and I just picked 3. Right now in the Community Health Center and in the lab, and we use a PI, or performance improvement process, and most of these are things that we're monitoring on a monthly or an individual level. We have PI teams through all of those, so they would be used to tracking and identifying themselves. If we were to look at that first one on disease control, this would be a high-level organization. This would be the way I would look at saying, are they accomplishing what their goals are? Because as they look at their goals, they would look at, for each one of the diseases, how many lab tests, what are the standards, protocols, and what should we have done for the whole population of these patients? This would be a disease management kind of process that again, as we look at it from a high-level type of performance measure for the department. Again, that 90% of facility inspections, staying above that, would be a high-level goal. And it really encompasses the inspection process and the management of that from a very broad look. In the lab, we looked at the 100%, but there are other process outcomes, achievement outcomes but I looked at those particularly because they're very performance and measurement oriented. Quick summary then on the health sector is that we have right now, when you look at both expenses and revenues, roughly $126,000. That is not the net impact on the general fund. We have a medical expansion grant that we'll be looking at, the full year of operational impact for the new building, the inclusion on the budget of Lincoln, Minnehaha cooperative agreements, and a second year of our community readiness grant that are making the major changes in our budget.
Thank you very much, Councilor Brown.
Judy, do you have any sense of how many refugees are coming into the city annually?
It varies right now from about 200 to 300 or 325. This year we're getting about 150 here in the next 2 months, so it's a real impact. And
what does that do for your level of service? Are you able to keep up with that demand?
Most of those folks, and in any of our 9,000 clients, I always look at, we have about 30% coming in and 30% going out, because most people find that we're, a confined service. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 phone calls to get in because we haven't got an open appointment. So people, as they get health care, move on. And the same thing, the refugee populations, probably as they get work, and most of them get work within the first 2 to 3 months, really move on. Some of them we may have for longer. Some people come with different chronic conditions that we're going to help them manage so they don't get integrated into the system as easily, or they have more of a struggle with the healthcare system. But they have Medicaid for the first 6 to 8 months, so when that happens, that's a nice payer for us.
But you're able to keep up. Do they come in large groups and immediately come to your services, and are you able to keep up when that happens?
The refugee groups, come in as a group, and we've got a process down. Keep up is an interesting. I don't know how to measure keep up. We have a process that we bring them in. We do a large-scale screenings, and we reschedule them. That they've gotten this down to I wouldn't say a science, but they've gotten it down to the fact that they feel like it's manageable. I think the most difficult issue in that one, and it's both for both LSS and our office, is that we have a higher no-show rate in that population. So they take more case management, more facilitation to get done. But that's
probably an issue,
right.
I would assume.
That's also what that refugee grant does to us. That comes through us from the OPR of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and that is specifically for the case management and the outreach workers to help those. But it's still a difficult one. I think particularly in dental, when they don't show up there, we're quite irritated because that's pretty limited service. But
Thank you.
Councilor Jameson?
Judy, you mentioned about 1/3 of the students in the public school system are eligible for some kind of assistance. Would you give me an indication of what the guidelines are to establish that kind of number?
You mean how they track that statistic?
Yes.
They look at what that number is how many kids have actually signed up for free and reduced lunch. And free lunches go up to 135% of poverty. Did I say free, right? And reduced is up to 185% of poverty. And that would basically be how many kids are signed up. And the school system would tell you that, I believe, because they just told me this yesterday, that in middle school and high school you see a drop-off of that percentage because there it's more of an image issue for those students, and so they just don't eat. In fact, I hear that periodically. I'll do my tearjerker story. I just heard they're through the homeless outreach program in the school system. They have two boys that they do have a backpack now for kids over the weekend that they send home meals, and enough to somebody could eat over the weekend. And they had two boys who they started it up for who couldn't keep their first meal down when they got back to school on Monday because they had gone without for so long.
Councillor Stagers, or excuse me, I'll go back to.
What
Councillor
is
Wilkins.
the dollar value that's being used for the poverty level then? Do you know offhand?
I'm within reason. I can email you the exact chart. I'm
Okay.
close. For a family of 4, it's about $41,500, give or take 200 or 300. For one person, it's about $9,500, and then the kind of staggered right there.
Thank you.
Councillor Stagers?
Yes. Once again, Judy, in regard to screening of the refugees, the new refugees, is this something that's mandatory that they have to do, or is this something they have a choice?
LSS, actually some of it's mandatory. There are some public health standards and screenings for certain diseases that actually reported to us before they come in. So there would be some of the HIV, some of the hepatitis, those sorts, TB. They're going to be monitored for as they enter the country, and we're going to be informed of that. So there's certain follow-through that has. From a screening perspective, that's what that refugee grant helps to do, and it's also what Medicaid. Most of these individuals have Medicaid as they come into the community, and so that's intended for that kind of service. Because as we look at that, many of these have some parasites that aren't normal to this part of the world.
So this is really mandatory then?
But there's parts of that are mandatory. Then there's some of the chronic diseases, like arthritis, or they've had bad injuries, wouldn't be mandatory, but that we might link them up for services for that. I mean, we don't do all those things either.
Okay. And another question I have, you mentioned REMSA. How much is REMSA going to be getting next year?
My quick calculation, let's see, I can have to be quick. REMSA, just the staffing portion, is just under 300,000.
Just under
285,000.
285,000. And on that staffing, we have the director being part-time, is that right?
The medical director,
Yes, he's part-time. And then we have an RN
right?
and anybody else?
The QA officer that works with Metro.
QA officer. And so they have $285,000 salary, is that fair to say?
Roughly.
And then one last question. You mentioned the pandemic. I guess it was last year the bird flu was kind of the rage. Everybody's concerned about the bird flu. What's the latest on that?
Just heard in Washington, D.C., it was at the Pandemic Flu Summit, and everybody still says it's not if, it's when. But we have been watching bird flu for about 8 years, this particular strain. If you look at the statistics, again, that's why they say if not when. Nobody will put a number to it. I think the biggest illustrator to me is that for a virus to go from being within a bird flu or with an animal down to being able to be transmissible human to human, that's kind of a seven-step change. And viruses change and mutate all the time. That's just why we don't have the vaccine that we'd like to have yet. But if we look at bird flu, it has gone through 6 of those steps. Now, it's been sitting and holding for years, several years now, at that 6th step. But there also would say some of the cases, and the cases aren't decreasing of human illness, some of those cases have been human to human, they just haven't, but it's mainly been caregiver to caregiver. They can't quite trace the thing, and people won't say the absolute, it's human to human transmissible yet because it's not widely transmissible. But
Have we had any cases in the U.S.? Or
no.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Just to follow up to Councillor Jameson's comments about the poverty level, as Judy can attest, on the Homeless Advisory Board, we spend a lot of time talking about how a third of our student population in Sioux Falls is below the poverty level. People are astonished by that. And to follow that up, Judy, what's the number? 600 some instances of homelessness in families in the school district?
It's right. It varies from about the 575 to about 650 over the last 2-3 years.
So it's always good for us to keep in mind that although we're a wealthy community, there's a large population out there. And these are working families, often two-income families that fall into that level. So we're learning more about that on Homeless Advisory Board all the time, but it's some scary statistics.
Councillor Costello.
Judy, on the food code, the state has a food code, and the city just adopts the state's food code.
We adopt most of the food code. They don't have food code for like grocery stores and those sort of things, so that we use national standards on.
Okay. I recently had to get recertified for my CervState, and the instructor and all the pamphlets all had a national food code, and then he would give us the state food code, and the difference, they're so slight. Why don't we just adopt the national food code?
I can't answer for the state.
Can we do that, though? Instead
Could
of
we?
adopting the
Yes.
states, can we just adopt the national food code?
We could, and I think the difference then is that the state contracts with us and that we get a health reversion, license reversion for part of those inspections. So we have to inspect according to theirs. There's some places that we've done some things, so we stay pretty close to the states. But you're right, every once in a while that's a variation. It's the wild and wonderfulness of urban to rural needs.
So if we were to adopt the national food code, would that put us in jeopardy of some of our funding, or?
I mean, we just have to, it makes it more difficult for the inspectors then if they're following the state for the restaurants that we get or the national for, other kinds of food purveyors.
Well, I won't push it too far, but I would just encourage you, when you're working with the state, this seems really ridiculous to have these 2 or 3 different versions of food code, and they're so minor differences.
Councillor Staggers.
Yeah, Judy, talking about food standards and so forth, how long has the city of Sioux Falls been engaged in inspecting restaurants instead of having the state do it?
Well, I started on the health board in roughly 81, and we were doing it then. I can't give you any more history than that.
Has there been any thought about the city saving some money by, letting the state just simply do the inspections?
I'm not the policy setter, so
I've
I
thought
haven't
about
thought
it
about
myself, but I didn't know whether anybody else.
I
We'd save
would-
several $1,000s. But.
Let's put it this way. I know some water scores of places outside the city of Sioux Falls where I wouldn't drink the water in the restaurant. Those are the reasons that we want, I think, to set our...
So you're not comfortable with the state inspections?
I didn't say it. I just said there are some water scores.
Councillor Jameson.
Just one quick question, Judy, for the public. What percentage of your revenue or the operating costs is generated by federal and state grants versus what is actually general fund dollars?
Percent?
Or just dollars, that would work
I don't know if I can come up with that one easily in grants. I can email it to you.
Okay, appreciate that.
I can list them faster than I can give you a percent.
That's fine.
Any other questions for Judy? Thank you very much for your information today, Judy. And now we will move to the Planning and Building Services, and our Director, Mike Cooper, will do that presentation. And Mike, thank you again for your incredible flexibility with people like me.
Good afternoon. I am Mike Cooper, and joining me today, Jeffrey Smith, Assistant Director of Planning, and Mike Roth, Assistant Director of Building Services. And since they're the ones that are tasked with developing the budget and monitoring, they're going to be helping me go through the presentations today. Just to follow the same format that you'll see this afternoon, The building, our budget for planning and building services represents just over 4% of the general fund. And if you look at that in more detail with our expenditures and revenue compared with 2007 and 2008 budget, one of the interesting things about our departmental budget is that overall, we have about 24% or less than 1/4 of the revenues that support our department come from the general fund. And the balance of that is from building permit fees, other fees, and we have some federal grant programs that we use for different types of transportation and other planning. To explain that even further, just before you jump ahead, sorry, we have 3 line items in this budget that include the Sioux Falls Development Foundation annual contribution, Main Street Sioux Falls annual contribution, and then Forward Sioux Falls 5 contribution from the city. Those 3 line items that are within this budget represent about $514,000 proposed for next year. If we take that amount and move it out of this budget and just look at the cost of city staff providing services to the community, the impact on the general fund is at about 12.5% of the revenues would be from other than fees and grants. So I think that's important to understand that we're not quite an enterprise department like some of the public works folks, but we are getting very close. And in fact, what we found in recent years is that when we have robust development construction like we've been experiencing, in many cases the revenue because of the building construction comes in above our projections. So the point that I'm trying to make is that our impact on the general fund is very minimal. If we go to the next chart that kind of breaks it out in more detail, for next year, personnel services is going up. This year, with your support, we are hiring, we have hired, I should say, another housing inspector, who I think you'll get to meet here fairly soon. And then we are requesting another building inspector for next year. So we will have an impact on the personnel costs because of new positions. And on the non-personnel side, as you'll hear later on from Mike Roth, one of our initiatives for next year in building services is to develop a records management system that we think is long overdue. And with that very brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Schmidt and have him walk through some of the planning division highlights.
Mike,
Just before I do that, real quickly, just to kind of talk about, we keep getting asked about building construction activity. Is it going to slow down? What does it look like for the rest of the year? Right now, through the end of July, we're still way a substantial amount ahead of last year's construction activity by about $23 million ahead of last year at the same time. And that includes both residential and non-residential construction activity. And based on all the conversations that I've been having with folks around the community, I feel very comfortable saying that 2008 is going to be even a busier year for construction than 2007 across the board. So I don't see anything in the future that's going to slow down our development for the next 12 to 18 months, which is what we're talking about in terms of the 2008 budget impact.
Mike, before you step away, Councilor Costello has a question for
Yes,
you.
sorry.
Mike, you mentioned Main Street Sioux Falls Development Foundation and Forward Sioux Falls 4. Were they previously not in your budget? Or
No, they always have
always
been.
have been?
Yes.
And you said they were 540?
Yeah, those 3 line items are at about $514,000.
Do you have the breakdown between the 3? Or
The Development Foundation is 175. Main Street Sioux Falls, I rounded it up a little bit at 164. And then Forward Sioux Falls is 175. And we'll be going through those in more detail tomorrow night with you. Yes.
Councilor Staggers has a question for you, Mike.
Yeah, it's also in regard to the same organizations that Pat was talking about. I think Forward Sioux Falls and the Development Foundation, those are the same amount of money that we gave them last year. Is that right?
No, they're different. And if I could, I think it might be more appropriate to talk about those tomorrow night because we'll have people here with each of those organizations to go through those budgets individually.
Okay, I guess my understanding is we weren't going to have Forward Sioux Falls?
I think a couple of those groups are unable to be
Yeah.
with
Okay.
us tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Forward Sioux Falls 5 would be a $50,000 increase from the '07 budget.
Okay, 50,000 for Forward Sioux Falls?
Yes.
And the Development Foundation, is
I
that?
believe that's the same.
Same.
And then Main Street is up slightly from the '07.
Okay, it's up,
It's up,
okay.
and after I sit down, I'll look up what that amount is.
Okay, great.
4,000? 4,000 increase.
Any other questions yet for Mike before he steps aside for a moment?
I'll be close by.
Okay, I know you won't get too far away. We won't let you get too far
Okay.
away. Thanks, Mike. Jeffrey?
Thank you. Jeffrey Schmidt. With the next slide, there are 5 programs within Planning and Building Services. I'll be talking about the current planning and long-range planning, and then Mike Roth will be talking about building services. This slide just has a breakdown between 2007 and 2008, and we've just spent a little bit of time talking about the 3 other items that are within current planning, that $1.2 million and the $500,000 that comes within that. If you go to the next slide. When you look at the pie chart, 66% of our budget is within the building services, 27% is within current planning, and sad to say, but only 7% is in long-range planning. That would be our real challenges with a city growing as fast as we do. A lot of us in with inspections and current planning. Next slide. Our mission for the planning office is to promote the orderly development of Sioux Falls in an efficient and aesthetic manner through long-range and current planning. We try to provide public information and data on planning issues. We also coordinate areas of historic preservation, neighborhood preservation, housing, transit, and transportation planning. Next slide. For current planning, our specific goal for 2008 is to follow that mission statement. What we'd like to do is promote the orderly development of Sioux Falls in that efficient and aesthetic manner. We're going to try to do that with the goal of developing public improvement policies for the approximate 200 acres of land that we acquire each year. This gets back to the last slide of Gene's presentation last night. We get 200 acres of public land each and every year. That land, as it's stated in the next line, is not only just for parks, but it's for fire stations, water tanks, schools, drainageways, and right-of-way. What we don't do a very good job of, because it takes a lot of planning to do, is once that land is retained, there also has public improvements that have to take place. You may need to put in easements, you need to put in sidewalks, you need to put in infrastructure to those public lands. And how do you balance that? How do you do it once you get that land each and every year? So the bottom line is the CIP and the operational budgeting is necessary for these public lands. And how do we do that each and every year? Well, we actually need to come up with some policies and start planning better to take care of those lands each and every year. Next slide. From a long-range standpoint, what we'd like to do in 2008 is provide more and better information and data on neighborhood preservation, and specifically in some housing programs. The goal would be having flexibility for older areas of the city in regards to affordable housing. Older areas, 1940s, 1950s, we have a lot of small lots throughout the city of Sioux Falls where it's very challenging to develop a housing style that the people want today. Everybody wants a 2-stall, 3-stall garage to put all their toys, their campers, their boats, and on these smaller lots, you can't do that with today's standards. So how are we going to do that? What we'd like to do is this action plan, develop some new zoning codes that reference some of these older subdivisions and allow them to do that, as well as to continue to educate the public on city resources on how to do affordable development. With that, I will turn over to Mike Roth in Building Services.
Thank you. Welcome, Mike.
Good afternoon. Mike Roth, Building Services Department. Our mission statement. Our mission is to ensure the compatibility of uses and safety of buildings through the administration and enforcement of zoning ordinances, floodplain ordinances, building ordinances, and housing codes. Next slide, please. The purpose is to review development and construction plans to ensure compliance with the city's land use policies and ordinances, and to review construction documents and perform inspections to ensure buildings are safe and durable. Our goal is to provide fast, friendly, and knowledgeable assistance at our public counter and to provide timely review of plans and quality and timely inspections. Our action plans include the continued development of permit software to assist our customers at the counter, continue the implementation and use of wireless technology that we've been implementing over the last several years, and to develop a records management system. Next slide, please. Notable changes for next year is we'd like to add one additional residential building inspector to continue to perform timely inspections and quality inspections. Develop a records management system to protect and retrieve the plans that we have now and to receive plans in the future electronically. And to install a conference media system so that during consultation meetings, all parties present at the meeting can observe and see the plans that we're discussing. That's it.
Thank you, Mike.
Since we're interfering with the schedule today, we thought we'd be very brief.
Yeah, that's
So-
fine. Well, we have many opportunities to ask you questions, too.
Yep, and we'll be around if you have some other things
Yes.
that come up.
Mike, I'm just curious, do we have any idea what percent of the budgets of each of those three groups that our money that we give them represents? Would you have
We
any?
could get that to you, yes.
Okay, I'd just be curious in that.
Of the different
Yeah.
program areas,
The three
yes.
areas,
Yep,
yep.
we can get that for you.
Counselor Litz.
Mike, on the records management system at building services, would this be computerizing more of your inspectors out in the field?
A lot of it is digitizing the paper plans. I mean, if you come down to building services, there's rows and rows or shelves of old building plans that even predate Mike Roth, if you can believe that. And but unlike Mike, they're starting to crumble and fade. And we are concerned that we need to put together a records management system that, I know that Deborah's working with you and the whole city on a similar process. So the idea would be to electronically reproduce those so that they can be utilized by the public and also as a way of preserving those for the future. That's a big part of it. And then there would also be some additional technology so that people that are coming into building services to either get a permit or to look up information would be able to retrieve that information electronically.
Okay, then one of my other questions was, you've got some building inspectors, and when they come out to inspect some of my jobs, some of them are just, I look in their truck and it looks like a tornado hit it. I mean, there's paper all over the place. And I notice it's quite a paper trail, and I was wondering if, I know some of your mechanical inspectors, I believe, they've got computers,
Right.
but some of the guys who do the framing inspections, the final walkthroughs and things like that there, would they be entering the electronic age pretty soon?
I'll let Mike. Mike has been working with staff for quite a while on this process.
Yeah, over the last several years, we've developed internally with the help of IT our own software program so we can assign requests that come in over the phone electronically through a wireless network to our electrical, plumbing, mechanical inspectors. We're working towards that with our building inspectors, but first we need to develop the software to intake the building permits. And we're close to doing that. Hopefully this fall sometime we'll start that process, and then sometime next year we hope to have the building inspectors on wireless network also. So we found it extremely helpful. Inspectors who are on a certain part of town get a call, they can find out that inspection is just around the corner, where in the past they had to come back in, had to drive back out. So it's been extremely useful to do this.
Very good. I know you guys turn in $875,000 back into the general fund every year, and it's my opinion you should take some of that and use it to.
Thank you. We do. We turn in about $700,000 to $800,000 a year to the general fund, over and above our expenses. Thank you.
Counselor Staggers.
Yes, I have a question for Mike.
Okay. Which
Yeah.
Mike? Mike Cooper? Okay.
No, yeah, Mike Cooper, right.
Okay.
We were just talking about Main Street, Sioux Falls, Forward Sioux Falls, and so forth. What would you think if we took those out of your budget and placed them somewhere else in the city budget? Because it just doesn't seem like they should be there.
I think as long as you support those, I would be in favor of that. It just falls under the overall area of urban and economic development. I think that's why historically it's been in this budget, because obviously Sioux Falls Development Foundation is our economic development entity, and Main Street Sioux Falls and Ford Sioux Falls would fall into that same category. So I don't know if Gene or Tom would have any comment on that, but
Okay.
it's just under the general. It falls under the general category of urban and economic development. I think that's the history of it.
Sure.
But we don't use those funds, we just pass them on
Right.
to those entities.
Yeah. Also, oh, gee, okay.
We'll have Jean Roanhorse from our Finance Department add a little bit more to that question.
I don't know that we'd have a lot of concern where it's at. It was, we looked at all of these subsidies and the contractual obligations and tried to put them into a department that it seemed to fit in. And as Mike was saying, the major reason it went into planning is because that's the economic wing, if you will, of the city. We can keep track of it almost anywhere, but it's going to land in somebody's department. One thing I would like to point out to you, your summary that you have has this all broke out in it already. And you also received, just a minute here and I'll find it. You also received in the last couple of weeks a document that looked like this, and a second one that looks similar to it. Right here, it looks similar to it. And it has all of the contractuals and subsidies broke out on it, and that's part of what the review is for tonight. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking of, it would seem like it would be better to put it, with the rest of the organizations that have subsidies and things like that.
The rationale that the contractual obligations are is we're actually buying services that the city at some point in time deemed that it was appropriate to provide that service to its citizens, but they do it through a nonprofit or something of that nature, an outside third vendor, as opposed to providing it themselves. So we've really grouped them in two large groups. The contractual services are $6.8 million, and the subsidies are about $500,000. And so that's why we have not grouped them together. We don't view, for instance, the subsidy with the pavilion as being we don't view the amounts paid to the pavilion as being a subsidy. It is what we pay an outside vendor to operate the facility for us.
But for example, Forward Sioux Falls, we're not really contracting them for anything, are we?
Sure we are. They're a very important wing of the Development Foundation and the Chamber that specifically focuses on recruiting businesses to Sioux Falls. So clearly it's an economic development wing. It's just it has a little different mission than the Development Foundation itself.
And Main Street Sioux Falls?
Main Street Sioux Falls is targeted at the downtown area. Again, from an economic development standpoint, they've been working very hard to recruit businesses downtown, to help upgrade the downtown area. Particularly, there's a loan program that they operate to assist businesses that are moving in down there to get going. It's very much an economic development activity. It's just very targeted to the downtown area.
Councilor Costello has a question for you, Jean.
Gene, the Main Street Sioux Falls and Development Foundation are obviously every year. Forward Sioux Falls 5, how many years is that?
Forward Sioux Falls 5?
Yeah.
I think 5 years.
The second of 5 years.
Yeah, this
The
is
second of 5
5
years.
years.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jean, for adding to the discussion. Okay, now we are going to move from planning and building services to the area of culture and recreation. And we would like to have Sally Felix, the library director, give our next presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm going to just do a couple slides here by way of introduction to culture and recreation, and then obviously talk about the library. And as you know, Culture and Recreation does include the Parks and Recreation Department and the Library Department. You can see here that the Culture and Recreation component of our budget or our program has 17% of the general fund budget. And then if we look at that 17%, it's split out. 65% goes to Parks and Recreation, 28.6% to the library, Arena gets 4.6%, and the Orpheum 1.8%. Okay, for the library, you can see here that the library gets 4.9%, almost 5% of the general fund budget. Our mission statement is to enhance the quality of life enjoyed by residents of both Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. And everyone knows, of course, that in 1995, the city and the county library systems merged. And on June the 1st, we entered our 13th year of this very, very successful merger, which has been a good benefit for both the city and the county. Our overall mission is to stimulate and encourage the joy of reading and learning, and then to provide information and materials in a variety of formats that reflect our customer needs and uses. I wanted to say a little bit about library use, and just to try to give you some perspective. We talked a lot last night, or Jennifer talked a lot last night, about staffing issues and about what has happened in the last 10 years in the city regarding staffing, and the library certainly has been very much a part of that. The top statistics are just a couple from last year. We had almost 1.1 million people come in our libraries. We had close to 2,200 community groups use our meeting rooms, and we had almost 11,000 people get library cards, and that's 11,000 people who had not had library cards before. In the last 10 years, a lot of things have happened in the life of Siouxland Libraries, just like the life of the greater city of Sioux Falls. We have been impacted by adding building facilities, by adding services, by increased use, and also by community changes. And we've talked about some of those community changes already up to this point. We opened a brand, we had a library branch, a very small library branch in Brandon, but in 2002, we opened a much larger branch in Brandon. We also added about 4,000 square feet to the Cayley branch in 2002, and of course in 2005 we opened the Oakview Branch Library, where there had not been a library before. So most of our personnel growth has been tied to buildings and the need to operate them. We also have had significant increase in our use. You can see there, I did give you a statistic there. We were up about 26% in terms of what people check out of the libraries since 1997. Computer use is just phenomenal. And I believe toward the end of 1997, we had our first public internet access computers. And I think we had about 15 computers, and we had about 8,900 uses in 1998, which would have been the first full year of that. And last year we had 211,000 uses, and we're up now to, well, I have the statistic down here somewhere, but in the close to, I think, about 70, 75 public computers. Just as kind of a sidebar, I just learned this morning, but we recently received a Gates grant and to help pay for some new computers. And as part of that, we needed to do a survey about computer use. And we've been getting those surveys back, and it's just phenomenal. I mean, I have 2 pages worth of testimonials about how great the computer use is. And from people who don't have them, but also from some people who do. We had one child say, well, it's really great because my computer at home freezes up all the time, and they don't do that at the library. So this continues to be, it's a relatively new service in the life of libraries, but it continues to be a very, very important one. Our children's programs also have gone up significantly. This, again, is a priority of the library system. It has been for many, many years prior to my arrival, and it certainly continues to be. I did want to say a little bit about staffing. Jennifer did mention some of the conversations that she and I have had in past. I think our staffing issues are not unlike some of the things that she talked about last night. We have a lot of doors we need to keep open. You know, and as the city grows and as the city has expanded geographically, you know, into the southern part of the county and down into Lincoln County and now east and the northwest, you know, this presents a challenge for us certainly, and we're looking at, you know, adding a West Side branch in the not too distant future, and so, you know, to have a library presence, you obviously, you know, you need to have staff to have it. Our business is constantly changing and staying the same. We really have not got rid of any responsibilities, and nor are we looking to get rid of any responsibilities. You know, people still want books, they still want story hours, they still want puppet shows, but they also want the new information delivery services as well, and certainly our computer use is a testament to that. And our use of our, what we call non-print collections, our DVDs, our videos, our audio books are really quite high. So we're always faced with a balancing act between the old and the new and the whatever is coming. The concern about span of control was mentioned last night, and I would certainly say that's an issue for us as well. I have one staff member who is a professional staff member and is in that small piece of the pie chart that is mid-management and has supervisory responsibilities, who is in a very major position at the main library that also has a system-wide responsibility for circulation services. She has 16 people to supervise. That is way too many. I have made changes, and we've worked on making changes and doing some reorganization with the help of HR and with the support of the mayor over the last 4 years, or 4.5 years that I've been here. And we've been able to deal with some of our span of control issues, but we still got them as well. And I'm not really quite sure what to do about that one. We have about 73.2 full-time equivalent positions, and that's not including the maintenance positions that are assigned to the library but are included in the library's budget. 60.5 of those FTEs are authorized positions. The others are part-time positions. We have totally 101 employees. So the issues of personnel and trying to manage all of this and trying to get everybody trained is very much with us as well as other departments. Okay, now he's way ahead of me here. Looking at our library budget, you can see our expenditures are up overall 3.5%. That's our request for 2008. Our revenue is up 11.7%, and that is mostly due to a fairly significant increase from the county. We are asking the county, and I believe it's been preliminarily approved, for $778,800, which is a $70,000 increase in 2008 over 2007. Just as a reminder, that money that comes to us from the county is to, you know, provide for the county service that, you know, that we're responsible for. And that is generated by a property tax that's levied on property owners outside in Minnehaha County, outside of the city of Sioux Falls and outside of the city of Del Rapids, because Del Rapids is not part of our, by choice, has not been part of our system. So that is certainly a significant increase for us. We also are looking at about a $33,000 increase in late fees. We did change our late fees or our fine structure at the beginning of this year and brought it a little more into the, let's see, what are we in, the 21st century, the late 20th century. And we are seeing some increased revenues on that. And again, that's not anything anybody has to pay. All they have to do is get their things back on time or tell us their sad story for why they can't, and usually we're pretty flexible. Okay. Expenditure breakdown, you can see personnel service expenditures are up 2.1%. I did not request any additional staff for next year, despite the fact that certainly we could use them, as could everyone. But, you know, we will be having, as we finish the renovation and expansion of the main library, you know, that will have an impact on staffing, and certainly I mentioned the West Side Branch Library, and that certainly has an impact for the future. Our non-personnel service expenditures are up 9.9%, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. I do also want to remind you that most of the money for library materials, for books and all of our audiobooks and our DVDs and most of our library materials, actually does not show up in the general fund. That is in the capital fund. It's in OSEP. So there is some material in these non-personnel, or some money in the non-personnel expenditures for library materials, but most of that is not in the general fund. The next one I'm going to pretty much skip over. These are our 7 program areas, our 7 divisions. What I've done, if you want to go on to the next slide, Tim, what I've done really, I think it makes better sense to talk about these in 2 bigger chunks. We basically have public service functions, and then we have administrative, technical, and support service functions. And I've tried to outline here for you. Public services are, all of our circulation services, our information services staff, our reference staff, the folks who help everybody with the computers, our children's program, our youth services program, our mobile services, which we do have an outreach program, and also Bookmobile, and then our branches. And we have 3 city branches and 8 county branches. Administrative, technical, and support service is really kind of a catch-all for everything else. Obviously, true administrative staff and costs are in here. All of our part-time staff are included in here. The maintenance staff that's assigned to the main library are in here. All of our technical services staff, which are the folks who actually get the materials and catalog, process them, get them ready to go out to people, all of that is in there as well. I have 2 goals under public service and 2 goals under the administrative, tech, and support services. Certainly we're going to be doing many other things, but these are issues that are going to be premier for us for next year. And one of those is, I worded it hopefully nicely here, and you can read it, and I also tell people we hope to be still standing about 18 months from now, those people who are involved with the main library. It's really going to be a challenge for us to, well, the project itself is a challenge, given that we're renovating an existing building on a very small, relatively small piece of property. But also we are very much going to try to maintain a public service presence at the main library. We really hate to take that away from the downtown area. But it is going to be different, and it is going to change, and it will also change as we proceed through our construction process. Probably the earlier stages will allow us to have a little bit more normalcy, and then later things will change. So we really are trying to promote branch library use. We're trying to promote use of our website. People can do a lot of things to manage their accounts and access information, online databases, and a variety of things, online. So we really are going to try to promote that even more. We do have as a goal, we did try to mix in some performance measures here, and some are measurable, and I recognize some are not. But we do want to increase our circulation from our branches by 5%, and we were conservative. I suspect it will be probably more than that. We are going to try to maintain our programming schedule, our children's programming schedule, which is so very well attended and very popular, at least at the 90% level from 2007. And we're going to need to be flexible both in terms of the scheduling and where we do those programs as well. As I stated, we're going to maintain at least a limited access to our collections and our computer services and our staff services at the main library. And some of the staff, myself included, are lucky. I guess I should ask Judy. We are going to be relocating to the Reynolds building since the health folks are moving out. And the timing works out well because it's before that all the renovations will take place for moving city staff in there permanently. So, and it will work out very well for office space, for us. So we'll be kind of out of the immediate fray of all the construction activity. Our goal, too, relates to the county side of services, and that is to provide the citizens of rural communities with popular reading centers through small branches and a bookmobile. The bookmobile also serves the city. Much of what we have here, we already do. We want to maintain those existing hours of service. We're continually working on doing what we call weeding, which is getting rid of the materials that are no longer of value for a variety of reasons. We've had quite an emphasis on doing that at the main library, because obviously we don't want to keep things that we don't need, since we're going to have to probably move them and box some of them up. And we don't want to do that anyway. And we've really been encouraging our city branches to do this as well. So now we want to take that out to the county branches. We also want to do some training in readers advisory skill with the county branches. And also are hoping that we might even drive some of our business there. We do have a lot of cross-business, particularly with Brandon, so I would look for their circulation to increase somewhat as a result of people finding it more convenient to go there. And then we actually do the evaluation of the bookmobile use and adjust the schedule on a regular basis, but we do want to take a closer look at that next year. We really are finding, people's lives are different than they were when bookmobile service was a very popular service many, many years ago. And so we've adjusted the service to focus more on children's services and more where there are groups of children. The neighborhood stops just really don't work very well anymore, just because people's lives are different than they used to be. One notable change in our budget that in the 2000 classes that directly relates to the first goal of the main library project, we do have a significant increase in the professional services line. It's really due to two things. One new thing, one existing thing. The new thing is that I mentioned we're going to relocate temporarily, and we're going to have movers to help us do that. We also are anticipating, we've already gone over our snow removal budget for 2007, so I bumped that up a little bit, and that comes in that particular category for us as well. Administrative, technical, and support. Our first goal is to maintain our branch library building safety, appearance, and functionality. We're making, I feel like we're making some headway on this. We've been doing some things this year, and I'm pleased that hopefully the budget will allow us to be able to continue to do some things, particularly at the city branches next year. We are going to do a formal building library assessment, and we hope to have that done by the middle of June of next year. And then we're going to provide some non-routine maintenance improvements at the branches. And when we go to the next slide, which lists the notable changes, this kind of lists out what those are in kind of short order form, and then where they appear in the budget. At the Running Branch, we're painting, carpeting, doing some repairs on the parking lot, and some repairs on the exterior concrete. At the Cayley Branch, we are installing an automatic door opener, which folks, with physical disabilities find very, very convenient, or even people who have lots of books and library materials in their hands and can't easily get the door open. The Oakview Branch, we continue to landscape. We've done a lot of things, and Eric Jelkin in Facilities Management has been great with helping us out with that, he and his staff. Tree trimming, Parks did it for us for the first year or so, but now it's serious tree trimming, and Parks Department is stressed for time, so it becomes our responsibility. And we also want to start to do just general maintenance on the parking lot. The building will be 3 years old. We want to keep on top of that, so we don't end up with the situation we've had at the Cayley Library and potentially at Ronning. And at the Crooks Branch on the city or on the county side of things, we need a new air handler. And you can see the differences there in the line items. I'm almost finished. The administrative, technical, and support service second goal is not a very glamorous one. In fact, it's probably a pretty boring one. So if anybody from technical services back home is listening, I apologize. But it is very important for us. Our technical services folks are the underpinning of everything we do. And acquiring the library materials and getting them in a timely manner, deciding what we want to buy, actually purchasing it, getting it in a timely manner, getting it cataloged and processed so it's ready to go out to people, getting it out is very, very critical to customer service and for us to be able to do a good job. So we really have, and it lends itself well to measurement. Some things we do are not so easy to measure, but this is one of those that we can. So we did work on this, and again, I'm not going to read through the goals. You can read them yourself. In summary, we are going to see a lot of change in 2008. A lot of it generate's a better word probably than caused, but generated by the main library project. We will see change in use patterns. I know that today. I can promise that. I talked about some of the non-routine maintenance, things that we need to do at the city branches. We're going to emphasize some training for the rural branches, and we're going to streamline our procedures for acquiring materials and getting them out for folks. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Jameson?
Oh, yes, Sally. The construction period while the main branch is being rebuilt, how significant is your service going to be reduced?
I'm not sure, because it has to do with how they're going to stage the process, and we don't have that quite nailed down yet. My guess is that for the first part, more than likely they'll do the new part. They'll construct the new part of the building. So we will probably be able to maintain, fairly, maybe not exactly the same level, but pretty close to the same level of service that we currently do. But as they start to then have to renovate the existing part, I think it's going to be significantly affected. As I said, I know our IT analyst says we're crazy to even, think about trying to keep computers going, but, we're going to certainly try to do that, because that is such a significant use of the main library. We will, warehouse any collection that we need to, but we will do it in such a way so that we still have access to it. I mean, we'll have to get it, but, if somebody really, really wants something, we're going to send some materials out to the branches to the degree that they can hold them. If you've been in our branch libraries, there's not a lot of excess space there, but, we can pile some things in for a temporary basis. So that's my best answer at this point.
The access to the library during construction.
Physical access to it?
Yes.
We will have one. I have no idea what it will look like. There will be less parking, I would imagine, because obviously the construction folks have to stage, someplace. But we do have a lot of the availability of on-street parking, with around the library. So people will be inconvenienced, and that is true. And we'll do the best we can, and I'm sure the construction folks will do the best they can to minimize that.
Thank you.
Councillor Benega?
Sally, with your construction downtown, will that change your priorities on where the mobile library will go? And frankly, will it make any difference on where you expect your service points might be?
That's an interesting question and a good question, and I don't think it really will change where the mobile will go. Not to say that we can't respond to a change if we see that there's something that makes sense. I suspect what is going to happen is people are going to go more to the branches, and particularly the city branches and possibly Brandon too, depending on where people live. I think that's where we're going to see the impact.
Is there any chance to use that vehicle for stops at the community centers?
Yes, and I think we do have some stops. I am not entirely sure. I know we used to have stops at some of the community centers that have the Kids Inc. programs, and I believe we still do have some of those. The bookmobile, actually the stops get adjusted fairly frequently, and it is based on use. And I mean, I'd have to have the person in charge of that, come and talk to you about the real specifics of it. But if it's use it or lose it. Because it's an expensive service, as you can imagine, and we can't really afford to stop for one or two uses. So we do try to do that, and we have found, much like the bookmobiles of old, and I wasn't obviously around when the bookmobile got started in Minnehaha County. I mean, that was a long, long time ago, and I know you had bookmobiles in the city of Sioux Falls too. So I don't really know what your service is targeted at. But where I came from, bookmobiles got started to serve schools before school libraries. And not that we're serving schools, and we do have very good school libraries in Sioux Falls, But the idea that it's a children's-based service is still with us and seems to make sense. And what we've tried to do is identify where there are groups of children that, might not otherwise be well-served, as in larger daycare centers and that type of thing. And that's one of the reasons that Kids Inc. was one of the stops as well.
I guess my concern, and to be frank, is the fact that I think that there's going to be some service declines downtown with the main library, especially the parking issues. And there's only so much room that you have in the branch libraries, as you suggested, so I think we need to look for alternative spots. And it seems to me an opportunity might be for us to use the community centers.
We can certainly look at that. We're very open, and that is, as I said, the bookmobile schedule gets adjusted frequently, so we can certainly respond to that.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown has a question.
A few follow-ups to the bookmobile. What is the cost of that service, do you know?
I would have to get you that. I don't want to say something off the top of my head that isn't correct. If we look at, if I go back to that chart that I skipped over so quickly, we can look at the mobile services program, and that gives us an idea. Oh, thanks. Actually, it's probably fairly close to the accurate number, because mobile services in 2007 had included our outreach program as well. And we still do that, but we changed it to a different division. It's somebody else is responsible for that program. It's actually in the second one, circulation. So when we look at that 16911, again, I'd want to go back and make sure that what all is in there. I'm sorry, I just don't recall at the moment. But that's probably pretty close.
And what are the hours of that? Is that an 8 to 5 service, or?
It varies. Depending on the stops and where they're going. Some days they start out at 8, and some days they start out later in the day and end later in the day. It also incorporates the daycare delivery program, which was an initiative of the City Council right prior to my coming. So we charge that aspect to this mobile services. And that is, so the cost for that would be in there as well. And that, I think we have upwards now of about 90 daycares. We don't use the bookmobile to deliver. We actually do have volunteers who actually do the physical delivering. But the staff of the bookmobile are the ones that get everything ready, select the materials, make all the arrangements with the daycares. So that number is in there as well.
So there are evening hours?
Probably early evening hours. There are not late evening hours.
Okay.
No.
Because I'm just wondering, in the change of lifestyle with two parents working, whether, and I don't know that that's someplace we want to go, but I'm curious if that's of interest. And also, with what Councilor Benninger was talking about, given the numbers that Don sees in those community centers, especially picking up after school, maybe that would be an opportunity for that program.
And we're open to that. I guess you just have to think about people's time. And I don't pick up a child after school. But I imagine that if you do, you're kind of in a hurry. You know, and it's sort of like, it used to be with bookmobile service and community stops that people just had more time. And so if the bookmobile came, I mean, by its nature, it's a limited service. It's limited as to what is on the truck. It's limited as the number of hours you can be any one place. So if you were scheduled for your stop, you know, every 2 weeks or every month, you know, for Tuesdays from 3 to 5, it used to be that was okay. People could do that. People, by and large, cannot do that. Or people in our community cannot do that anymore. So it's been a struggle, you know, trying to find those perfect blocks of time where we really will get people who've got the time to pay attention to it and use it.
And do you track the number of people that come on?
Yes,
okay.
And again, I don't have those numbers, but if you're interested, I can certainly, Jody Fick is in charge of that program, and I can certainly have Jody put together some statistics. She's got all kinds of numbers and all kinds of, she's very, very good at tracking all of that and adjusting and making sure that we're getting as much out of our bookmobile service as we can. Now, having said all that, when we see what happens with the main library, and if we've got to utilize our bookmobile service in a different way to meet those needs, we're very open to that.
Thanks, Sally.
Councilor Staggers?
Yeah, Sally, I have a question about library policy regarding purchasing of videos and things like that. My question is, we have private video stores that make a business of, renting out videos, but the library, there's no charge. Can you respond to the competition?
We have bookstores also. And,
That's right,
And,
yes.
and actually, it's interesting, and I can't say for sure that this is the same for the video and well, now they're primarily DVDs. But there's a real synergy, certainly between bookstores and libraries, that each one thinks the other is a benefit to it, and I think that's probably true. The nature of our video, and again, it's primarily DVDs these days, and that's going down the pike too for something new. But the nature of ours is that you can't walk in the library, you don't see. I don't even know what a new movie is. I'm so bad. I haven't been to a new movie. The new Harry Potter movie, whatever that is. If you walk into Hollywood Video, you're going to see wall after wall after wall with a new Harry Potter movie. Well, we don't have wall after wall after wall. So, number one, we can't keep up with the kind of demand that the video stores supply, and nor, do we attempt to do that. We certainly have popular videos and DVDs, popular movies. We also have a lot of what we call nonfiction ones that you would never find in the video stores. We also have a lot of series, a lot of the PBS series, a lot of travel series, and I could go on and on about that. You're just not going to ever find. So ours is a real mix, and it's just like our print collection. It's like our books. It's a real mix of things. So I don't think we compete with, I don't think it's unfair business practices for the library to have those materials.
So do we have a policy, though, in regard to the purchase of videos, or is it just, what the librarian feels might be a good video? Or?
Well, there's library judgment in the selection of all of our materials. Some of it is driven by what we know people will want to borrow. Just like the New York Times bestseller list. Some of it, and much of it, is driven by reviews. We have professional literature, professional journals, and many of the staff read reviews. Some of it is if, people are particularly interested and knowledgeable about any area of the Dewey Decimal System, whether it be a print book or a video, they just may know about things. We have an amazing array of Hindi movies that I venture to guess you're not going to find in Hollywood Video, and they are extremely, extremely popular. So, it's that kind of thing. And there's always a give and take and an interaction with the customer. And we encourage people to let us know about things that, they think might be of interest.
Sally, thank you very much for being with us today. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Since the top will absorb as much as the bottom can stand, I'd like to request a 5-minute intermission.
Okay, 5 minutes, and only 5 minutes, please. Good idea.
That's all right.
was thinking.
I keep drinking so much water, and then I thought, well, no, hang in there, Dee, and it's like, oh, I really needed that. Plus, I needed that cookie, too, for a little energy.
On the municipal policy things, are you going out? People are asking.
Really? We did. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to have to leave right at 4:30, so if we're not done, it's not because I'm mad, it's just and I might follow it.
Hi.
You got to leave too.
The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Feel bad. He handled the rejection well.
Well, he does. Maybe been doing it all his life. It occurred to me, well, it seemed to me that'd be a lot more conservative organization than this one. If you didn't have any luck out there, it makes you think you would here.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you ever go out to the legislature about it? Were you ever, did you ever get?
Continuing along the lines of culture and recreation today, our next speaker is going to be our director of our Parks and Recreation Department, Don Kearney, and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to present our 08 budget to you. First slide that we have up, as Sally mentioned, we are a part of culture and recreation, and as part of the overall general fund, we represent about 11% of the total general fund. Our mission is that we're responsible for maintaining our public open spaces and for providing a quality city system of parks and recreation facilities, and then positive leisure opportunities for all persons in the community. Our total budget expenditures and percentage of change from the previous year is 1.8%, and that is primarily consists of personnel increases, step increases for our staff that they receive throughout the year as their anniversary dates occur, and it also involves non-discretionary increases, things like fuel, utilities, things that are somewhat fixed that we have to absorb every year as those costs go up. One thing of note, too, in looking back at the previous three budgeted expenditure years for our department, for the last 3 years, including this year, total expenditures have been less than 3% over those last 3 years. This slide also shows the revenue increase of about 5%. That's primarily due to increased revenue at our golf courses, and it's also due primarily to increased number of teams participating in our sports leagues, so additional registration revenue. The bottom line, the net change to the general fund as a result of our department's budget is 1.4%. The next slide basically shows the percentage of increase by personnel and non-personnel expenditures and how that is broken down between the 1,000 and 2,000 class. The following slide shows our different programs that we have within the department. Some of them are much larger in scale and represent the vast majority of our department operations. And there are several other smaller funds that, and I'll talk about all these programs later in the presentation. This item, or this chart, shows our total budget and how that is allocated. As you'll see that over half of our total budget is involved in infrastructure and grounds maintenance. It is essentially all the parks, all the mowing, all the facilities within those parks, pools, restrooms, courts, everything that we have out in that park system. It also includes right-of-way mowing, storm drainage detention mowing. It also includes various other properties that we take care of throughout the city that aren't necessarily parks. And as of last year, is about a little over 4,000 acres of maintenance that we provide service to. And the other thing that it doesn't include, and maybe another way to look at it, is that it includes everything with the exception of our recreation programs, the zoo, and our forestry crews, because that actually is broken down separately. And you'll see that grounds and infrastructure maintenance, while it makes up 55% of the total, recreation programs makes up a significant portion of that. And then the third largest item is the Great Plains Zoo and Delbridge Museum and the support we provide for that facility. As far as our goals, we have two large major goals, and actually multi-year goals that we've been working on and will continue to work on. The first one is an online registration system. We currently have a system that allows us to register for programs through our registration system that's done by calling in or by stopping in person. One of the things that we don't have the ability to provide now is an online registration system so that people can sign up via the internet. There's another module that you can buy that would allow folks to be able to do that at 10 o'clock at night in their pajamas that they'd like, and basically would provide a convenience for the customer to be able to come in use that service. Yet many other departments throughout the country have gone to this. They've seen a significant level of success in going to this system. And I think as people become, more and more people get computers, more and more people have access to the internet, it's just a logical progression for us as a department. And so it's been a broad, overarching goal that we've had, at least since I've been here. Been working with Mike Hall and the IT staff to come up with a program where we would be able to purchase the software yet this year in 2007. That is funded, and this fall we'll be working on selecting a software to be able to do that. And then one of the other things that we've learned from other communities that have done it is that you definitely don't want to launch it all in one day, and you want to gradually bring that on board, program by program. One of the areas that we get lots of requests for this is our adult sports leagues, where they just say, hey, give me a internet site that I can go on. You can take my credit card. I'll pay my league fee, and I'll get it from my sponsor later. And so that's something where everybody's busy, and they just want a more convenient way of being able to register for programs. And it also includes shelter reservations as well, and other facilities that we register for. Some of the action plans that we'll obviously have for that in 08 would be to provide training for all the staff that will be involved in the implementation. And obviously we want to do a big marketing piece to be able to make people aware that that program is available and out there. And some of the outcomes that we hope to experience as a result of it is that obviously we want people to be able to register at any time of any day throughout the entire year. We hope that through the first year that we'll be able to bring 20% of our total programs registration and reservations, and hopefully people will see that kind of use in the first year, and hopefully we'll see that 20%. But some of the other benefits of being able to do this, it provides data that we currently don't have now if it's done in a manual system. For example, season passes, for example, is a tough one because lots of volume, lots of numbers, but we have multiple sites, and so that is something we're going to be trying to work through with the IT staff to determine how we can implement that, because that's a major component of our registration. So we believe it will provide an increased data collection, and then it also has a financial reporting component of it, similar to what we have now, but this just would be an online piece that would be available. One of the other large overarching goals is to begin the process of agency accreditation through the National Recreation and Parks Association. This is much like the fire department's accreditation that they've received, and I believe have found it very valuable. One of the action plans for that particular goal is to complete a 75% of the self-assessment for agency accreditation through the National Association. And it's basically a system to say what things do you need to shore up before you have a site visit by the National Association before they determine whether you're worthy of accreditation or not. You might ask, why are we doing this? Why is it important? Is it just a bragging right thing? It's really not about that. It's not about a large expenditure of money. My staff will tell you it's going to be a lot of work, but we think it's going to be valuable. One of the things that we believe it will provide is an examination by your peers from other communities and throughout the country that will come in and evaluate the policies and procedures you have in place, the systems you have in place for delivering parks and recreation services, and measure it against what everybody else is doing out there and what everybody else believes to be desirable from those agencies that are already accredited. One of the other aspects of that would be to strengthen and improve agency operations. And then the other thing I think it does is that it reinforces with the community the evidence of accountability and with the community leaders and the citizens to know that what we have in place is a best practices type situation. Onto our programs, and as I mentioned, this is the largest program. There really are no notable changes to the budget or the service level. The staffing remains constant from current levels in 07. And one of the things I'd indicate to you is that overall, our department is fairly well and pretty stable with regard to full-time staffing. One of the areas that we could use some support in is in our full-time park maintenance staffing. That is an area that we've seen quite a bit of growth in, and one of the reasons why we've been able to kind of bridge the gap is our ability to hire seasonal staff. They are a critical component of the service delivery that we have out there, but some support on the full-time maintenance side certainly would help. And the other thing that we see as regard to workload, special events, it's a significant portion of our time, especially Kelby Maris, our operations manager, and Barb Hermanson, our recreation manager, both spend a significant amount of time coordinating and facilitating those special events, a lot of which occur in the downtown area and in our city parks. And so it's something that it's tremendous for the community to be able to have those events. But one of the things we see is that not only the number of events coming on as new events, but the events themselves are growing and require more staff time on our end. But we certainly want to be supportive of that, but it's just another area that we've seen quite a bit of growth in. This next chart is a pretty good summation of where we see the park maintenance staff compared to developed acres, that gap widening. If you'll note on the green bar at the top is our part-time staff that we currently have increased over the period of years. We've gone from 119 part-time staff in 2001 to 160 in 2006. And during that same time, our park acres have increased 241 acres. And we started in 2001, we had 1,838 acres, and in 2006, we had 2,079 acres. But the main message that we wanted to share with you with regard to this particular slide and the park maintenance staffing is that our full-time staff have remained essentially flat over those last 5 years or 6 years. And that is an area that we believe that we could use some extra help with regard to being able to properly supervise those staff and the span of control that Jennifer talked to last night to make sure that they're adequately trained, because the folks that we do get in, some have there's a wide gap on level of skill they have. Some have never seen or used a string trimmer before. Some can drive all of our equipment with very little instruction. We hire a lot of college kids, a lot of high school kids, and fortunately we also hire a lot of seniors, a lot of retired farmers. We hope more of those folks will apply that have a higher degree of skill level in operating machinery and equipment, because they're very good at that. And but the point being is that it does take some time, and also to train those folks, but also realize that they're spread out over those 4,000 acres in every corner of the city, in every neighborhood, and to be able to continue to monitor those folks with the same number of full-time staff that we have out on the ground becomes increasingly difficult.
Councilor Bennett, go ahead.
Don, can I ask you a question? I didn't mean to interrupt. Have you ever tried to establish a relationship with any of the VOTEC programs with the maintenance schools that they offer?
You know, we have two very good recruitment sources. One is Southeast Tech. They've been very good because of their grounds maintenance institute that they have there. A lot of our full-time staff come from those programs. The other area that we get a lot of staff from on a full-time basis is SDSU and the park management program. And some of those two people actually do feed themselves up through the part-time ranks. They work part-time while they're going to school. They also end up getting more of a long-term seasonal position where instead of just working 3 months while they're in school, now they're out of school and now they're working for us on a regular basis. And that is tremendous. Unfortunately, when you're hiring 160 of them, you get a good group of those folks, and they're great, and ultimately they usually transition into part-time to longer or long-term part-time seasonal workers, and then to full-time seasonal workers as we have vacancies. But we just wish we had more of them. And so, yeah, we have a good partnership with them, and they've been a great feeder program for us, but we just don't get enough of them in the seasonal ranks. Yeah.
Councilor Stagers has a question.
Yeah, Don, during the summer months, many people contract out with private yard services to take care of their yards and things like that. And we thought about contracting out with private services instead of having so many temporary people during the summer to contract a lot of this out.
The area that I do know that the city's looked at, I believe 1 or possibly 2 times, has been the mowing of the grounds, which a lot of our seasonal staff do. In purchasing and finance worked with us on that maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I want to say that we looked at that, and it proved to be significantly more expensive for them to do that. But yeah, and we do use some private lawn services for some of the areas that maybe their equipment is better suited than ours. We have larger equipment, and in those areas where they have their smaller mowers, they can get onto medians and islands, that it's not real conducive for our type of equipment. We do use their services. Okay. The next slide, with regard to recreation programs, again, no notable changes to service levels or the budget. Just some of the points that I kind of want to reinforce with you is that more people, obviously, in the Sioux Falls area means more participants in our programs and in our facilities. Our adult sports programming is really growing. It's just kind of just taken a huge jump in the last couple of years. Our kickball numbers are through the roof. Our volleyball registration numbers are up. Our basketball registration numbers are up. And with that, though, requires gym space in order to accommodate the number of teams that we have. We work very closely with the school district, and we'll continue to work closely with the school district. But as with most communities, finding enough gym time, not only for our programs, but for the YMCA's programs who use our facilities, and there's a lot of crossover there. It never seems like there's enough gym space. And so we're certainly working with the school district to provide enough opportunity or enough facilities available to keep our programs growing and provide that service, which seems to be really popular.
Excuse me, Don. Councilor Brown has a question.
Don, any sense of what's driving that higher adult usage or participation?
You know, I really think there are a lot of young families moving in, folks that are very active in the community. The thing that I've noticed, and from the other 3 communities in which I've worked, people are very active here. They're very outdoors oriented. They're very fitness oriented. And I think the other thing is that we have lots of colleges here in town that feed those programs. They ultimately were playing in sports. They were playing in intramurals, and they want to continue that on through their earlier years in life, or under 40, so to speak. But we also have over 40 leagues that are popular as well. So I just think it's a real active community. It's a younger community, and I think that's why you see some of that growth. And frankly, you know, when you add 3,500 people a year, you know, you need the additional space and the additional programs. So,
Councilor Jamieson?
Yes, I know that since 9/11, some security things have changed, but the National Guard Armory at one time we funded part of that so that there'd be gym space up there, but it's out of the way and difficult to reach. But is that one of those that could be utilized for the adult league?
They actually use it.
come on up.
As of right now, Bob, that is not a place that we are using. In the past, I know that facility is very busy. At one time, and did we end up giving them the money to help us that we were going to do it together? No, we are not currently using that gym space. Okay. But I will thank you for telling me that, because we are in a shortage for our men's adult league, so I will contact them.
Good.
And then just the other final note with regard to recreation programs, you know, every year we continue to serve it seems like a larger and larger geographic region. We got teams from all over the area, far away as Mitchell, coming to participate in programs, whether it be our programs or junior football programs or wherever it might be. Significant demand because largely the smaller towns aren't providing those types of services. So we have bus loads of kids from other smaller communities being dropped off at Terrace Park. There's just a lot of interest and a lot of use from non-residents in Sioux Falls. And so when we think of the 150,000 that we're at now, you know, it's certainly a much larger geographic region that we provide services to. And we appreciate that, and we're hopeful that continues. Next slide, please. This next slide just kind of shows you some of that growth I was talking about. From 02 to 06, we've seen over a 10,000 participant increase. This not only involves our programs, our adult sports leagues, and other programs and activities with regard to athletics, but it also includes junior football, soccer, SEBA, the baseball organizations. We're continuing to see a similar growth, and I don't have a chart with me, but the chart with regard to adult participation is much more dramatic than this chart itself. Next slide. Great Plains Zoo and Delbridge Museum. We're very, very happy of how that's going since under the new leadership of Elizabeth out there. City support remains at current levels. We're at about $1.3 million in this subsidy that we provide for them. that dollar amount remains unchanged, and Elizabeth will be here tomorrow to talk to you a little bit more about that. One of the things that, if you go back to the programming slide, if you would, Tim, the programs, there's a slight decrease in funding from the 1.573 to the 1.535, and that's primarily our portion. That program includes not only this, the subsidy that we provide, but also our maintenance, grounds maintenance element that's in there. And if you remember, we kind of started from scratch. We kind of did an estimate and a budget based on not having done it before. What we're finding is that we can do it more efficiently than what we originally expected, and that's largely comes into the number of seasonal staff dollars that we need to maintain the grounds out there. What we've heard so far from the zoo and the patrons out there, that they're very happy with how things are going out there. And so because of that, along with some other line items that we had to move around, just not knowing what we were going to need, has proved to be beneficial. But the main portion of that is the number of staff that we needed out there on a seasonal basis. Next slide. A couple things under administration. It represents about 8% of our total budget. The economic impact with regard to the overall department operations. I think we all understand that quality parks and open space are important factors to prospective businesses and their employees. But along those same lines, parks and open spaces and community centers and trails, things that aren't maintained at a high quality level, also can be a detriment to your community as well. I've seen it in both ends of the spectrum. We like to think that we're on that higher quality end of it. And the other piece of it, I think, that I just wanted to mention and remind everyone of is that the significant economic impact our regional sports complexes have on our community. As you know, we did land the 2009 Midwest Regional Soccer Tournament, and CVB estimates that that's a $6 million economic impact. And from all reports, the 16 and under girls fast pitch tournament was a tremendous hit. Our crews that are out there at Sherman Park did a tremendous job. Essentially worked around the clock 24 hours a day to make sure that that happened, in addition to the 2.5 inches of rain that we received, and we're able to get all those in, and another $4 million in economic impact as estimated by the CVB. So, one of the other things that we've, obviously it's kind of been a buzzword as we've all talked about our budget this year, is performance measurement. And we've kind of just suggested some areas that we think would be good to measure in the future. We've talked about the parks within a half mile of every residence. One of the things that we were asking ourselves is that meeting the need? Is that the best way to provide that service? So that's one area that I think is worthy of consideration. One of the other areas I think would be good to measure, and you all hear about it from time to time, is our Project Trim. We're knocking on doors. We're out in everybody's neighborhood when you hit that area, and it certainly is a worthy program from our perspective and a very effective program from our perspective, but it does draw a lot of attention. And one of the ways that I think our goal would be to reduce the number of notices that we actually have to issue, and with the idea that if we can do some more public education, we can get some more compliance without having to be people actually having to give them notice of the need to have their trees trimmed according to ordinance. So that's something that we think that we can be effective at. One of the other things that we think would be good to do, and we haven't done it since 2001, is to do a Parks and Recreation needs assessment, or a community-wide needs assessment for that matter. Some of the things that it would do is would allow us to form a baseline for future performance measurement. Because how do you measure something if you don't know where you're at now, if you're improving or getting better or getting worse? And another area, another thing that I think it does is that it's a snapshot in time. Where are you at today on the needs of the community and how satisfied they are with the services that you deliver? So that's an area that I would like to revisit since we haven't done that in about 6 or 7 years. The next item is certainly something that's not, we don't spend a lot of time on with regard to actively seeking out donations, but we do think we have a pretty solid public-private partnership effort going on out there. We work closely with the Community Foundation. In 2006, private contributions in the way of gifting agreements to the city exceeded $1.18 million to the city. That obviously was a large part to the future gift of the Mary Jo Wagner Arboretum of $1 million. But the other thing that we've noticed, obviously through 2007, is that we've had 5 gifting agreements that have been executed since January 1. You recently heard about the Elman Trailhead. Probably recently read in the paper about the Miracle Field to the tune of $320,000. Sherman Park scoreboards all got replaced with the help of the People for Youth and their contribution there, the state-of-the-art Dactronic scoreboards. Dick Dempster's efforts to improve the Japanese Garden Island, and then the Greenway landscaping along First Bank off 57th Street. So while these donations, we don't go out and solicit those, they do a lot of times just come to us, and we try to facilitate that, because otherwise they ultimately, I think, end up being CIP projects that we'd have to fund ourselves. So we hope that trend continues, and I think that's just a testament to the people's care and concern about the park system in general. On to forestry. No new notable changes again, or in service level or budget, but I do wanted to share that 2008 starts year 4 of 5-year project trim, which stands for tree raising improvement methods. Our compliance rate is edged up so far in 2007. It was 96, now it's 97%. Basically says when we ask people to trim the trees, they trim them. The other thing that it does is that, as I mentioned before on the performance measurement side, I think one of the things that a lot of people get upset about is they get the first notice and didn't realize that that was an obligation of theirs to do it. And so it's like we kind of start off on the wrong foot right away. And so because the trimming the trees doesn't seem like that's that big of an issue for most. It's just like somebody's telling me something to do with my own trees, I don't like that. And so one of the things we've talked with Dwayne about is there a way to get some advance notice that this program is coming, this is what it consists of, this is what we're going to ask you to do as part of the city ordinance to be in compliance, and maybe when we get there, hopefully the number of notices that we issue would be less. And I think it's just a more public education and awareness that we could do that would really help our efforts there.
Councilor Staggers?
Yeah. Don, I've gotten a number of comments about the tree trimming program, and when I've taken a look at some of their trees, it seems like it would, the city could spend less time just cutting the one branch instead of going through this whole paperwork process and notification and so forth. Is there any way to maybe make it a little bit more reasonable? I mean, because it might be more cost-effective just to take care of some minor limbs without going through this whole process.
We'd love to add another crew to be able to just do it.
Well, you have a person that's going around and doing all this paperwork stuff. They could just cut it and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I'm
talking about minor ones, obviously, but there's a lot
I
of
think
that.
that's a performance measurement issue. I mean, if we feel like it would be better and that people would support the fact that we could just go out and every year take that 1/5 of our city and go through and trim it, I think that would make some sense too. I mean, we are spending a considerable amount of time going out and inspecting. Inspecting, just trim the tree instead.
Yeah.
And Dwayne's probably kicking me in the back here, but it's certainly something we can look into, because a lot of cities just take care of it.
Yeah, right.
But it is an expense.
Excuse me, I'm not trying to be rude to anyone, but is that I do know there's 2 counselors told me this afternoon that they need to leave at 4:30, and so I want us to just move on as quickly as we can within reason, please. Try to get through 4 more presentations.
Okay, very good.
I mean, we'll still have questions. I just didn't want to spend too much more time on Project Trim when we have 4 more presentations in less than an hour.
This is a big deal for many citizens who are directly affected.
Maybe we can
this
have
is
it
probably
right
more
at
relevant
4:30
to
when
this.
the other counselors leave.
Okay. The green area up there is the 3 years that we're currently in the 2007 area in the northwest part of town. 2008 will be the northeast district, and 2009 we'll round out that first cycle, and then we will start over. That's been a question to make sure that we stay on top of it in the future. So that just gives you a visual of the areas that have been covered and the areas to be hit in the future. Next slide. This is just an example of, doesn't look very good on that particular screen, but an idea of what a trim street might look like versus a one that has yet to be trimmed. Next slide. And then again, the perspective of a street that has been trimmed versus having not been trimmed. So certainly provide some value, and I think if you talk to Galen's staff that runs street sweepers and motor graders and snow plows, this is a significant benefit from them. We have had claims as a result of low-hanging branches, people getting knocked off equipment, those types of things. Albeit rare, it does happen, and UPS trucks stuck under trees as a result of low-hanging branches. So it is a concern, it is an issue, and obviously the overall health and benefit of the tree certainly is good for it. But also note that when we have windstorms or heavy snows that stick to the trees and bring down branches, this street on the right is probably going to fare a whole lot better and not bring down power lines than the one on the left. And it ultimately results in higher energy costs for the utility companies to come out and fix those lines. And I think down to our last slide, other programs, the municipal band, just a couple notes there that now that they are no longer in the Washington Pavilion and are at the Orpheum Theater, the total budget for that program has been reduced to the elimination of, we're not paying rent at the Orpheum like we were at the Washington Pavilion. And just a note about Lions Estate, it's used for the benefit of children, and we primarily use those funds for playground surfacing and playground improvements. And then Keene Memorial is used for Keene Park Golf Course, Keene Park, and Keene Park Community Center, and improvements in those areas. And then we also maintain a special project fund. It's used to record and account for donations that we receive from time to time. So with that, I'll open to questions.
Any questions, councilors? Councilor Stagers.
Okay. Some trepidation. I'm going to mention something about the accreditation process. When I talk to people, the people in Sioux Falls are very happy with the park system. And I guess I'm just wondering if we really would get any advantage out of accreditation. My experience with accrediting agencies, sometimes you get a lot more expense, and it might not be worth it. Would you comment on that?
Obviously, if I didn't think it was worth any time and effort, I wouldn't suggest that it be the goal of our operations. It's certainly, I think, in talking to Rick, he certainly found value in it, and I believe that what's it hurt to have somebody come in and evaluate your performance with regard to what other cities are doing that are performing at a high level to give you suggestions and advice for how you can make what you're doing even better. So for us, like I said, I don't anticipate any costs associated with this accreditation process, only hopefully improved methods for making sure that we're performing at the best possible standard that we can.
Okay. Don, thank you very much for your presentation. I do apologize for rushing you just a little bit there at the end. I'm just trying to accommodate so many people. And we now have 52 minutes left for 4 more presentations. So we will stay on schedule, and we will complete our schedule today, but you might just, next presenters might want to just think about a 12-minute presentation would be just right for us. Though we like you all, and we appreciate all your work. Anyway, public safety is, of course, very important to all of us, and we'll move to Fire Chief Rick Larson, and thank you, Rick, for being with us.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm going to kick off the public safety portion of the presentation. Here, the slides are similar as you've seen in past presentations. Public safety is 39.1% of the overall general fund budget. You can see there's 3 parts to the public safety budget. It's fire, rescue, police, and metro communications. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present our 2008 budget and programs, and I'd also like to thank my staff for the hard work they put in to put together this responsible budget. Fire rescue does represent a significant portion of the overall general fund budget, and I'd like to show you what you get for that. We strive to keep the community safe by providing education and preventing fires, and when emergencies occur, we respond to those. Increased license and permit fees and federal grant funds for hazardous materials and weapons of mass destruction training are the primary reasons for the growth in the revenue increase. When considering the impact of revenues, the net growth impact from 2007 to 2008 is 0.4%. Expenditures overall increased by 1.2%, which is just over $208,000. It represents maintaining all of our current programs, adding one fire inspector, shifting department-related expenses from the newly created Metro Communications Agency to us, and then adding the grant-supported training and education. These are the 7 programs that we provide. These programs are listed in order of their budget divisions. For example, fire is Division 1, emergency medical services is Division 2, and so forth on to the Emergency Operations Center is Division 7. This slide compares the 2007 program cost to the 2008 funding requests that we have for this year. An important event for all of our programs in 2008 is that we will seek to renew our accreditation status. An accreditation team will visit the department in early 2008 to evaluate all of our programs. We place great value on having experts from outside of the department undertaking this review and providing a quality improvement recommendations for our programs. The fire program includes needed funding to respond to fires. The emergency medical service, hazmat material, and rescue programs are value-added services with their budgets supporting training programs, management hours, equipment, and supplies. The fire program adds value to these programs by providing the firefighters to staff those vehicles and apparatus. Let me review the fire prevention, the special projects, and the Emergency Operations Center programs. The opening of Fire Station 5 in November 2008 at 2001 East 10th Street will help us reach this response goal. The station provides us the opportunity to reassign a fire engine and existing firefighters to improve the response coverage for that area of the city. The fire program keeps a minimum of 46 firefighters on duty that staffs 11 fire trucks and 2 mobile command units 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The next program is the Fire Prevention Division. It currently has 8 full-time positions. It has a fire marshal, a fire protection engineer, 5 fire inspectors, and a clerk. The 2008 budget requests to add 1 new fire inspector position funded through the increased licenses and permit fees. Another change proposes moving 1 position from our fire program to this program for a fire education specialist. This specialist would teach fire safety to elementary students through grade 5 and provide our fire safety house training. The only 2006 goal that we did not achieve was in the inspection area. These adjustments will get these inspections back on track. Our special project program includes 2 full-time positions. Both are training officers. These currently support our community emergency response team, first aid and CPR training primarily to the public. Other special programs include Fire Explorer Scouts and the Car Safety Seat Program. Our fire station at 37th and Minnesota on Saturday mornings hosts car seat checks for proper installation. And in partnership with the state, that program also offers new car seats to low-income families that do come to the program. Our Emergency Operations Center program, Sioux Falls has an excellent disaster preparedness program. This is a cooperative effort that also involves the Sioux Falls School District, Minnehaha, Lincoln counties, and many others. Fire Rescue provides the facilities, equipment, and supplies in support of this program. The budget reflects these costs along with program management time. In summary, Fire Rescue will continue to provide the high-quality programs with this budget request. Again, these programs will undergo a full accreditation review in 2008. Are there any questions?
Councilor Stagers.
Yeah, let me mention I support accreditation for the fire department because we're dealing with, issues of life and death there, and we want to make sure we have a good fire department. But Rick, you mentioned fire inspectors. You wanted an additional one? Is that what you mentioned?
Yes, we have requested to add 1 additional position funded by revenues.
So we have 5 right now, and we want another one?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain why that's needed?
The numbers of inspections that we do, the growth of the city, the licenses and permits that go along with growth, that's just placing extreme demands on my fire prevention staff. So Again, they're so busy, and it's hard to keep up. The fire marshal is also busy helping with inspections, and I want the fire marshal to be managing programs, not helping, and get better program management by fire inspectors doing all the inspections.
Thank you.
Fire Chief, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for your response to my request for a faster pace. So thank you so much. And with that, our Fire Chief now, Doug Barthel, will present to us.
Actually, Police Chief, but we're going to hand out a paper copy in the interest of time, and if you want to take notes, if you have questions later you'd like to forward those to me, I'd be happy to answer them. Also, in the interest of time, I've reduced my 100 slides down to 17. So, the overall police department budget is about a little over $24 million, represents 21% of the general budget, and a little over $1 million of that is funds Metro Communications. And there's our mission statement that you can read. The next slide compares our budget with 2007 and 2008. The entire budget with Metro expenditures is actually up 3.5%. There's a slight decrease in revenues for an overall impact of 3.6%. The Metro increased by $365,000. As you'll recall, last year there was some one-time money that was left over when the transition of Metro took place, so that was shared with the city and county, and unfortunately now that's catching up to us in 2008, so we have to increase our portion that we contribute as a city. On the next slide, the overall, this compares the budget without Metro in there. The overall impact of the police budget is then reduced to 2.1%. For $468,000. And when we break down the expenditures, you'll see that the wages and benefits account for $398,000 of that, and the actual operating expenses of our department, fuel and other things that it takes to run the building and resources, actually only went up $62,000. Next slide lays out the 8 programs of our department, compares them from 2007 to 2008, and in the slide after that also just breaks it down in a percentage-wise. We'll now look at each of the programs individually. First one is our investigations division, which is more commonly referred to as detectives. That's comprised of the different functions: property crimes, fraud, crimes against persons, and narcotics. They actually have about 36 employees in that area. We have one of the main things in there that I wanted to touch on was, in the last year we've been working more on computer-related crimes, and then also the sex offender registration. As you may or may not know, federal guidelines are going to be changing here. Actually, by 2009, it's going to require that all sex offenders register 4 times a year. Right now, our state requires twice a year, so it's going to actually double our workload with that. In Sioux Falls, we actually register about 1/3 of all sex offenders for the whole state. So, the next program is the Crime Lab, or CSI, as might be referred to. That's mainly comprised of civilian employees. There are a couple of sworn officers in there. A big portion of their budget is the dealing with the evidence issues, and then also training is a big part of that as well, because it's a very specialized unit. There's a lot of different training that they have to go out of state to receive that they can't get here. And unfortunately, unlike CSI on TV, we can't just solve their crime in an hour. So it requires those skills to be able to effectively investigate the crimes. The next program we'll look at is our patrol section, which is actually comprised of our traffic section and also our canine unit. Patrol is pretty much the backbone of our department, and still remains to be our top priority. Answering 911 calls is always going to be our top priority, and other services that we provide will take a back seat to that, because that is something that we need to take care of up front. We're always looking for ways to be more efficient and effective in how we do that, and try and free up some of that time so we can use what resources we have to be more proactive and do more of the community-oriented policing. And those are really the sort of things that are difficult to measure, what crimes that you prevent. And so I hate to always just look at, is crime going up or your calls going up, because there are a lot of things that, because we're there, we prevent, and we can never put a number on those. which if you look at the next slide will actually show that out in statistics. And I might throw in a little asterisk with this because the declines really aren't as significant as they look there after 2004 because we changed our computer records management system and the way that we tracked calls and counted them. So although there was certainly a decline, it wasn't quite as significant. So now in 05 and 06, we're comparing apples to apples there, and you'll see that the numbers have virtually remained the same. But a lot of that's attributed to because we did increase our staffing 3-4 years ago, and that was just starting to catch up in the last couple of years, and there we're seeing a significant difference. Population is certainly going up. That does mean the criminals are going away, but I think this is where you can see the definite difference in having sufficient staffing and being able to be proactive and get out and prevent some of those crimes. So. Our next program we'll look at is community services. This is comprised of several different areas. The main one is our school resource officers, which continues to be a great program for us. We actually have a total of 11 of those. They're in all of the public high schools and middle schools, as well as 2 of the private high schools. Our DARE program is also in this, and along with crime prevention, training, and our custodial staff. We continue to do a lot of the other, this is another part of the proactive thing, and these are some of the programs that I think the citizens of our community expect, whether it be the Crime Watch. Last night we had our Neighborhood Watch with the National Night Out, a great response to that. That we're constantly being asked for crime prevention presentations and our Citizens Police Academy and those sort of things that kind of happen behind the scenes and aren't necessarily what you see out on the street. The next program that we have is our records section. This is comprised entirely of civilian staff. They basically collect and maintain police reports and document transcription services for the police department. Just one thing I wanted to highlight with their section is, again, with the community or customer service, always look for better ways to provide service to the community. We're actually working with a software company where we'll be able to provide accident reports online. You'll be able to go online and purchase the accident reports. Currently, you can come to us and get a copy of the report, but this company will provide that free of charge. To us, they'll actually charge a little extra. Or probably our biggest customer is insurance companies, but so they'll either be able to come to us and pay the usual price, or do it through a vendor, more convenient, and pay the convenience fee to do that. So we hope to get that online within the next year. And moving on to our newest program, Animal Control, which we've now had for a little over a year. It's been somewhat of a challenge, but we've been working through it, and we've found them to be a good fit. I think it was a good place to put them under the police department. We've had a lot of different issues that we've been able to deal with because of our size, be it training or vehicle maintenance, those sort of things that we're already staffed with and able to provide through our department. So we were able to absorb that into our department, and I think probably saved the city and the taxpayers some money as we did that. So we actually converted one of our records section employees this year and made that an animal control position so that we could staff them a little bit better and hopefully help with some of the call issues that we've had with them. And then just to summarize notable changes that we've had for from 07 to 08, we actually implemented a system last year, phone reporting, and that's where rather than have an officer come out to your house and take a minor report, we're able to do that over the phone, and it's usually given as an option to the person if they want to do it that way. We do about 300 calls a month, so if you figure at least a half hour to probably an hour if you send an officer out, it's saving a significant amount of time by doing that. Personally, I would prefer that we actually go out and have the personal contact and take the report from them, but it becomes a budget issue, and I think we have to manage our resources as best we can. And this frees us up a little better through some of the peak times so that we're able to answer the 911 priority calls. The online reporting, we're also looking at a software program where people can go online. We've got some federal grant money, but a small amount that should be able to help pay for that, and you'll be able to go online and just some of those small reports like a lost cell phone, those sort of things, you can just do it online rather than have an officer come out and take it from you. The sex offender registration, we talked about that earlier. And lastly is the street crimes unit, which kind of grew out of our 11th and Duluth neighborhood project. We have created a two-person car that goes out mainly in afternoon and then nighttime hours. And unfortunately, they aren't able to do that independently as their sole job, but we incorporated. They also do regular patrol functions along with that, but they've been a great asset. They're actually out in an unmarked car, out working some of the gang issues, the graffiti, getting to know some of those people and identifying them, working with the business owners, and not just the 11th and Duluth area. They're actually working the whole city, and they've been able to create a tremendous amount of information database that oftentimes becomes invaluable should we have a certain crime occur, or say a homicide or something like that, where we're looking for a certain individual, and they're able to tie that back in. So we hope to continue that program and expand it as we go into 08. So with that, I know that was quick, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilor Costello has a question.
Doug, on the calls held, do you track the length of time that those are held?
Well, yeah, although they certainly aren't broken down here. Usually we start it at about, if the call's only held for 30 seconds, it isn't necessarily counted. About when they get to a minute or so, that's when we start to count it. And it depends. Certain calls might get held longer depending on the call volume, the time of day. Obviously, high priority calls are going to take a front seat over, say a vandalism report or something like that.
How does that relate to the actual response time for those calls? I mean,
well, if you look at our average response time for all calls from 05 to 06 actually went down a little over a minute. But if you look at the high priority or high response or high priority response type calls, we went down about 15 seconds from 05 into 06. So, which, when you're around 3.5 minutes, 15 seconds is pretty significant.
Any other questions? Councilor Stagers.
Yes. Doug, how many people does a sergeant supervise?
It depends on the area that they're working under. Usually probably about, on patrol shift, around 7 or 8 officers per sergeant.
Okay. And then also, too, the 11 SROs, what do they do during the summertime when school's not in session?
We've divided them up into a variety of areas. One of the big ones is the downtown area. They're doing a lot of bike patrols in that area, working the bike trails also in and around the downtown area. We've had a great response to that. We're using a few of them to help with sex offender registration verification. The state requires that we actually personally go out. Right now there's 486 registered sex offenders in our county. We have to go out once a year and knock on every one of those doors to make sure that they are actually where they say they should be. So we've been using the school resource officers for that. They've also been working with a kids camp program that we use. It's for DARE graduates, and they go through, it's about a 3-day program where they have police and fire and ambulance and go through some learning experiences with that. And we also use some of the SROs to help out in our detective division with some of the caseload that increases during the summer months.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
The phone call complaints, or whatever you want to call it, how do they compare nationwide to police stations or police that take complaints or things over the phone? Are we ahead, behind in that area? Or?
Well, if I think I understand your question right, there are a lot of calls that we still do here and a lot of services that we provide here that other parts of the country don't provide. We still do funeral escorts. We'll still come out and take your minor accident report. We'll come out and take your lost cell phone report. And it all comes down to what level of service do the citizens want and expect. And from what I've been able to judge, I think people like to have that. They like to have us come escort their funeral and do those sorts of things. So by doing the phone reporting, we're able to take some of those minor reports rather than send an officer out. Again, I think Personally, I would rather send an officer out, but we did not add any staffing for 07, and there's no staffing added in for 08, so we have to look at some of these areas and frankly cut back on them so we're able to answer the more high priority calls.
What I'm kind of interested in is, has there been a standard established nationwide as to what level of service you provide over the phone versus what you send an officer out to look at?
Well, for like the online reporting, yeah, it's pretty standard on that. It's minor thefts, basically a case or an incident where there isn't any follow-up to be done on it, or necessarily any evidence to be collected. Matter of fact, when the online program will have a series of questions that they'll have to answer, and if they answer yes to a few of those or certain things, it'll trigger that you need to have an officer come out and take this report from you. And there's also measures built in so that it kind of helps if someone decides to be deceptive in how they make their report as well. But so it's basically the no lead minor type report is. And I think you'll find that nationwide. And in some cases, they flat won't take the report. Others, they may just make a note that, yes, you called us. You can tell your insurance company you called us, but there's nothing to follow up on here. We still take the full police report, and occasionally those sort of cases down the road, things do develop, and I think it's a great tool to have that, and oftentimes we're able to help them out.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Brown has a question.
Chief, last night Jennifer touched on efforts to curb overtime. Can you expand upon that and just tell us what you're doing to accomplish that?
Actually, a lot of the overtime that we have, and you look at it, it's kind of deceiving that you might think that, as you add staff, you should be able to get rid of some of that overtime. But we have looked at a lot of, basically, if it's scheduled overtime, we have worked with our staff considerably over the last couple of years and been able to reduce that significantly. So if it's something that they know is coming up, say like a jazz fest, that event, all the officers involved in that had to flex their schedules throughout that week. So they had different days off that week, worked different hours, and virtually incurred no overtime. Of course, there's going to be other instances where we don't have a lot of control over that. All the holidays, if they work that, they are paid overtime for that if they're involved in court time. And a lot of that's contractual issues. Say they come across a drunk driver right at the end of their shift. I don't want them to ignore that, but if they pull them over and stop them, now you're talking a couple hours for paperwork and booking them in jail, plus they've got follow-up later, going to court or grand jury. And so those things cost money, and that's where the overtime comes into play. You will note, though, that our overtime has virtually stayed the same for the last couple of years. And I might also add that we've incorporated animal control, which they also have a fair amount of overtime just due to their small number of people. We have staffing minimums that we have to have out on the street, whether it be animal control or police officers. And if we get an officer that calls in sick, we have to hire someone back to fill that minimum number that we need to properly run the city. So we basically absorbed animal control and didn't add that to our overtime.
Thank you very much. And we will now go to the city council budget, and Deborah Owen will present that for us today.
Thank you, Deborah Owen, City Clerk. Thank you for the opportunity of presenting the budget to you today. If I will just get right into it. This picture is more for the viewing audience at home. This is the picture of the Sioux Falls City Council. And then to begin, a little perspective. For the 2008 proposed budget, the legislative branch uses less than 1% of the city's general fund, or 0.3% of the entire city revenues. An overview of all of the, I use the word department per se, but the city council budget in all, there's 3 divisions. But the percentage of change between 2007 and 2008 for personnel expenditures were 3.7%. For non-personnel expenditures, the percentage of change between 2007 and 2008 was 27.6%. This is primarily due to the cost of elections and the cost of legal publishing, but details on this will follow later in the presentation. Therefore, the total expenditures for the change between 2007 and 2008 budgets is a total of 11%. Briefly, before we go into the council's divisions, just a review of the council budget that was reviewed with the council chair Jameson the week of April 16th, 2007. And then subsequently, in the April 16th memo, a summary of the budget increases and/or changes were sent to the council. And then budget printouts were sent into your mailboxes, a hard copy for each of you. And then later this year, the fiscal committee met on June 30th and approved the budget with the exception of the final internal audit position. It probably should be noted that at the fiscal committee meeting, 6 of the 8 council members were present. And then on to the branch divisions. There are 3 divisions in the city council budget. There's the city council, the city clerk's office, and the internal audit. What this presentation hopes to answer and to address is what is the expected level of service to the city, the public, and the city council. And then how will this budget help to achieve that end? And that'll be summed up in a value slide at the end of each division. Division 1, the Sioux Falls City Council. To begin your mission statement, to protect and enhance the quality of life for all residents by providing efficient and effective customer-focused services through establishing policies and appropriating money for those policies which are implemented by the administration. This is a pie breakout of the percentage of change. 3% is personnel and 2% is non-personnel. A table which actually shows both the monetary change and the percent. In 2007 to 2008, the percentage of change for personnel expenditures was approximately $4,000. It should be noted that this is actually a non-discretionary, and these items are actually determined by the HR department. Non-personnel expenditures had a percentage change of 2% or approximately $2,000. These actually deal with or pertain to Granicus, and this is a project that was committed to and largely paid for with the 2007 budget. What it brings to the city and to the city of Sioux Falls, or to the city council, pardon me, are live video streaming of all city council meetings and actually all planning commission meetings as well. It makes the city council meetings available at any time and anywhere. You know, attending a 7 o'clock meeting on Monday night isn't always practical for everyone. And so if you don't have cable, you can't watch it on Channel 16. But now for the first time, people who have internet access at home or for free through the public library can actually watch a city council meeting at their own leisure. It also brings searchable archives, and it helps us manage the electronic information regarding the council. The value that this brings to the citizens and the city of Sioux Falls and the council is primarily transparency in government. It is improved public access to city council meetings and council votes. This also includes the archived meetings. An added benefit, actually, that we weren't aware of at the time of the purchase was we can actually web stream all of the programs on Channel 16, and we'll be working toward that end shortly. Also, there's increased efficiencies in government, and this is both sides. This is both the administration and the council. We have found that the clerk's office with the Minutes Maker program will actually be able to record votes and some of these minutes in real time the night of the meeting and not doing some of that follow-up work the day after. But also it affects webmasters and the Channel 16 crew. They also will experience or spend less time on making those programs available to the public. The City Clerk's Division. I took the quote from Professor William Bennett Monroe. He is an expert in municipal government and has written many textbooks on the subject. And he says of the City Clerk's office, quote, serves the mayor, the city council, and all administrative departments. All of them call upon it almost daily for some service or information. Its work is not spectacular, but it demands versatility, alertness, accuracy, and no end of patience. The pie chart breakout of the percentage of change between 2007 and 2008 has a 5.5% in personnel and 48% for non-personnel. Before I touch on that table, just want to talk briefly about the city clerk's role. We actually serve the council, the administration, and the public. We have always had the traditional role where we conduct over 130 meetings annually. We oversee and administrate the agenda management for the council. We conform to city charter and state laws by adhering to publishing deadlines in the official city newspaper. We administer the record retention program for the city. We conduct all city elections, and we do retrieve city records for council, the administration, and the public. But we also have a new scope that started in 2006, and so there's a dimension that is a change to the city clerk's office. Some of those highlights include the city clerk operates as the city council's liaison to the mayor and his administration, that we plan, direct, and oversee the day-to-day city council operations and functions. The city clerk participates in the city council's development of goals and objectives and assists the city council in constituent services and research. And actually, I think everybody in the office does research for you guys. And then we monitor legislation activity and keep the council informed on matters that may impact local government policy or the council's strategic plan. And then on to the table, I guess the nuts and bolts of everything. The 2007 and 2008 budget percentage change for personnel expenditures is 5.5%. That's about $17,000, and again, those funds are non-discretionary, determined by the HR department. The non-personnel expenditures had a percentage change of 48%, and the total expenditures, though, for the city clerk's office is 18.7. But I want to take a moment to address the non-personnel expenditures, which actually in real dollars is $67,564. So the next slide, this is summed up in two parts. We conduct city elections, however, and that's approximately $60,000 for that function, if you will. City elections occur in even years, and because this anticipated expense occurs every other year, it drives up the clerk's division percentage of increase significantly on even year budgets. This is the case for 2008 as well. And the remaining portion is actually $7,773, and that increase is due to fees paid for printing legals in the Argus Leader. Both elections and publishing legals are actually mandated by law. Legal publishing and fees, which are required by state law, continue to rise for the city clerk's office. It should be noted that this expense of publishing minutes, bids, notice of hearings, and other related items is the largest single expense in the clerk's division budget. These costs will continue to rise unless the state legislature offers relief to municipalities and school districts through a less expensive method of notifying the public. Publishing costs in the clerk's budget in 2008 will exceed $97,000. On a different note, and perhaps on some good news, we did do some changes this last year to which are no additional cost to the city and to our budget. We've worked to revamp the City Council's webpage. We've provided City Council minutes online, and under the theme of transparency in government. We've also working toward having email agendas so that you can actually sign up and receive automatically once an agenda or the minutes are posted on the web, so you could have those automatically sent to you if you so wish. And again, as in last Monday's meeting, we continue to work on improving our efficiencies in the office, which you saw that with the last executive order. Just want to take a brief moment during budget presentations to say thank you. Last year, the council restored one FTE to meet the expected level of service and provide staff to cover hours needed to encompass both daily business responsibilities and our nightly meetings. Prior to the city clerk's office coming under the legislative branch, the clerk's office had 5 FTEs. Now, with an expanded role, there are 4. We continue to increase our efforts to increase our productivity and evaluate and assess our office procedures. But we just wanted to say thanks. The value that the change in our budget actually presents is we will continue to do the day-to-day responsibilities in serving the council, the public, and the administration. We'll be able to pay for the anticipated expense of conducting April's elections, and we'll be able to meet the legal requirements by having money to pay for and publishing legals in our official city newspaper. And now to the Internal Audit Division. Their mission statement is to help the city achieve the highest efficiency and effectiveness with integrity. The vision statement is to be a highly respected service division and a catalyst for positive change. Their pie chart breaks out accordingly. 0.7% is personnel, which is non-discretionary. 33.2% is non-personnel. And I have a table that will actually walk through those numbers with you. The personnel expenditures percentage of increase, 0.7%, is actually $990. And the non-personnel expenditures, which is 33.2%, actually translate into about roughly $3,000. To focus on the $3,000, two-thirds of that are IT expenses. Those are computers and one printer item. IT actually provides the equipment and actually enters the charges in our budget. This is something that's not adjusted by the city clerk staff. That is the same for all departments. The remaining amount, which is $1,230, is a combination, a mix of mileage, office supplies, a CPA exam, and web-based training. The mileage is 100, office supplies are 700, CPA is about 220, and web-based training is about 200. So that's that. Now I took some time to introduce Rich Oaksel. The lead internal auditor is here, and Ann Oppegard is also here. She's a CPA and an Augustana professor who serves on the audit committee.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll speed this up a little bit. You'll be getting a packet with some information, and we'll go through that in a moment. The Audit Committee Chairman, Paul Ryder, he has written a letter to you as City Council members explaining. Yes, you can. Explaining why the Audit Committee would like to ask for a third FTE. And I won't read the whole letter, but I'll just read a portion of it. At the beginning of the letter, you can read on your own, but he talks about the little history of the Audit Committee over the last 18 months, what they've accomplished. And in the middle of his letter, he says, as you may be aware, the city maintained an internal audit function within the Finance Department for many years, and that consisted of 3 internal auditors. When 2 of the auditors terminate their employment, those positions were not refilled but replaced with other accounting staff. In the early stages of the committee's work, we met with administration to discuss transferring 1 or more of these positions to the city clerk's office to fulfill our personnel needs. Based on the previous internal audit positions allocated to the administration, the size of the city's annual budget, and the recommendation of the lead auditor, the committee strongly believes that filling the third position is essential. Obviously, a third auditor will allow the lead auditor to expand the 2008 audit plan and cover more ground. The other 2 arguments for having a third auditor are in your packet. You'll see a survey of cities and counties of similar size to Sioux Falls. And the average for city and counties the size of Sioux Falls are about 3.5 auditors. And the other argument is a benchmark or a rule of thumb of about 1 internal auditor for about every $100 million of your budget. Our budget right now is about $360 million, so that translates to about 3 internal auditors. And then the last thing in your packet is information from the Association of Local Government Auditors, and we just highlighted a couple of sentences there in the middle there, and it says, audit work can lead to new revenue, cost recovery, and economic impact well beyond the audit department's annual budget. If structured and staffed appropriately, an independent performance audit department can be extremely effective and productive. And we've included in your packet just a one-page, just a little summary of some cost recoveries that we've had in the past through internal audit, so you can look that over. And I just want to express our appreciation to Dr. Ann Oppegard, Paul Ryder, and Brad Witzel, the citizen members of the committee, who have put in a lot of hours and time to get internal audit off the ground and been a great resource. They receive no compensation, and we just want to recognize them in public.
Any questions? Rich, thank you for that addition. Any questions?
I just have 2 more slides, if I might. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Just to sum it up, the value. What does this bring to the City Council? I took a couple of quotes from actually 2 entities who were instrumental in making, or in the change of having the internal audit moved to the council and having an audit committee oversee their plan and their audits. First is the State Legislative Auditor General. he said in his report to the city, it brings the council, quote, an independent set of eyes looking at the activities of city government. And then the next quote comes from Ide Bailey in our Ide Bailey report from 2004. In talking about the value of the internal audit, it says it establishes an internal control over policies and procedures of the city. And then breaking it down kind of to home, how does this really impact us here? It tangibly realized cost savings to the city. Past examples, which you have on a page. There are some actual real examples with real dollar figures that are provided to you in that handout. And then also with cost recovery audits, and an example also would be the convention center audit that the internal audit will be working on this year, and having to, instead of having to outsource that, they can actually do that at a reduced price. So there is the potential of a revenue neutral job there. In summary and conclusion, the legislative branch uses less than 1% of the general fund, or 0.3% of the entire city budget. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present the city council budget to you today.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions by councilors? I know we've. Okay. Okay. Thank you both very much, and Ann, thank you for your volunteer service to this audit area. We are very appreciative of your efforts, and we only wish, I'm just speaking for myself here, but I think probably others could join, is that we actually very much respect the work the audit committee is doing. We realize, I mean, I've been on the council 5 years, and there are many, many departments that wish they had more staff that have been waiting in line for a long time. So just know that we are very appreciative of your hard work. With that, we will finish up today with Randy Bartunik and with community development and public parking, and welcome.
Thank you. Randy Bartunik, Director of Community Development. I know time is of the essence, so I'll try to be quick, and if there's any questions as I go along, please ask. Starting with the mission is to improve the community by providing suitable housing and expanding economic opportunities for persons of low and moderate income. And that really is consistent with both the home funds and the community development block grant funds, which primarily have to be used for low and moderate income benefit. If you look at our 2007-2008 budget comparison, you can see our net change is zero, and we have a balanced budget there. And that is something that we need to do with the federal funds. We need to get the money out into the community to, again, benefit those that are eligible. And it also complies with our federal spend-out requirements with respect to the Community Development Block Grant Program and Home Program. The expenditure breakdown, we've got personnel expenditures for 2008, $553,000, about a 6.2% increase. The non-personnel expenditures, we've got about a 12.8% increase. That number represents the amount of money that we expend within the community for eligible programs and activities. The revenue breakdown, the first one, actually the first line says CDBG grant allocations, program income, and carryover. The word carryover on that particular line should be scratched. It is strictly CDBG grant allocations and program income. That's our new dollars that we have coming into the community. For 2008, we're estimating that to be about $1,986,000. We also receive about $264,000, or we hope we will, I guess, with the 2008 budget, of general fund dollars. The general fund dollars actually go in two areas. One is for part of our staffing, because we do contract compliance work related to all the federal funds that come into the city. And the other part of it, about $120,000 of it, is used for our neighborhood revitalization program, which helps meet some of the federal requirements that we have with respect to match, putting in local match. The next line item, which is revolving loan fund and prior year carryover, we've got $2,015,000. That is not new money. Really, what that is money that we have within our department that is used, I guess as the name implies, as a revolving loan fund. For example, within our neighborhood revitalization program, when we build a house, enter into a contract for $110,000 for the construction. When that house is sold, that money comes back into the department, and we're reusing those same dollars over and over again. So the net new income actually within the department for next year would be about $2,250,000. The next chart kind of gives you a breakdown of where the revenue comes from. Again, Just about 48% of it is from new grant allocations, program income, and interest income. 6.7% from general fund, and about 45% of it is from the revolving loan fund and prior year carryover. Prior year carryover, I should mention what that is, and that's basically when we commit money to an organization or for a particular project in 1 year that is not yet completed during that year. It's somewhat similar to like a CIP project, because when we enter into a contract or an agreement with an organization, and say, for example, if we were to enter into a contract in October, those actual dollars may not be expended until the following year. The goal for the department is to support programs and activities that address identified community development needs and priorities. The objective is to obtain input on community development needs and prepare an annual action plan identifying the priorities, and that's something that HUD requires of us. We basically tell HUD in an annual report where we plan to expend the dollars and how we're going to use them prior to us actually receiving our grant allocation. If I were to narrow down the objectives, one of the things that we really focus on, and that's as a result of public hearings, is affordable housing and housing preservation. And that includes programs that provide benefit to low and moderate income households. Then we also have a national objective, which is increasing home ownership opportunities also for low income households. The action plan, some of the programs that we administer, where we've quantified specific numbers for it, is we plan to complete about 44 projects through the single-family mobile home repair single-family housing rehab program and the emergency mobile home repair program. And then we also, through our neighborhood revitalization program, plan to acquire 8 dilapidated structures and develop 8 new code-compliant homes. Plan on providing assistance to about 50 low and moderate income households to enable them to become homeowners. And also, as a part of our program, we do conduct public hearings to gather input on, citizen input on where we should expend the dollars that we do have. Notable highlights within the program, actually some things that we're working on changing this year, but will really take effect in 2008. One is through our neighborhood revitalization program, where we are going to try to amend that to include the acquisition and rehab of existing structures then that are ultimately sold to income-qualified homebuyers. And also the Homebuyers Assistance Program, we recently amended that to coincide with the neighborhood conservation program that was developed here this last year, where we're actually providing a greater amount of financial assistance to entice people to buy homes and become homeowners in the core area of downtown. That concludes the community development program. If you got any questions there, if not,
yes, Councilor Costello, first of all.
Randy, I thought we were concerned that our community development block grants were going to be decreasing, and I thought they were going to decrease by significant
well, that
amounts.
is a concern every year. Actually for the last 3 years in a row, it's been proposed by the administration about a 25 to 50% cut. 2008 is no different. The president has actually had proposed another 25% cut. When I'm putting my budget together, I'm trying to be optimistic that we're going to at least receive what we received in 2007. That's all of the financial revenue numbers that we have are, it's a stab in the dark, very honestly. Same thing with the program income. We have no control on it. That's money that we generate back from loans that we've made in prior years, and that can change dramatically.
But so the cuts are proposed, but somehow they ultimately...
What I'm reading right now through the Congress and Senate, there is support to maintain the funding levels for the community development block grant programs. I know there's been talk that if that goes forward, it could potentially be vetoed. But we, very honestly, probably will not know until about February of next year where we're going to actually stand on our grant allocations.
And here's, I guess, a point that I'd just like to point out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as the city general fund, your department gets $254,500.
That is correct.
That's all we spend on community development. And that's only a $10,000 increase over last year.
That's correct.
Councilor Brown.
On that, Pat, when we were in Washington, and Gene can contribute to this as well, there's a different will in Congress compared to the president on the community development block grants, and based on our conversations, it doesn't look like those are going to go away. Does that sum it up, Gene? I have a question for Andy. Given the presence of banks in our community and their competitive nature, are we using and leveraging that opportunity to get as many tax credit opportunities to do more affordable housing projects as we can?
Well, when you get into the tax credit projects, typically you're going to be looking at new construction of rental units and affordable housing. And the challenge that I've got is when you look at our overall budget and the new dollars coming in, the programs that we've got, well, starting with, we got $2,250,000 budgeted of new revenue. You subtract off the administrative expense, that leaves us about $1.7 million. The current programs that that we have been funding for the last several years, consistent with local priorities and the national objectives, basically use all of those dollars up. So I do not have any additional dollars to do and to fund affordable housing as far as tax credit projects. I don't know if that answers your question. You know, give you some of the major uses of the funds. We've got about $550,000 for the single-family rehab program, $400,000 for the neighborhood revitalization program, $300,000 for the home buyers assistance, $135,000 for tenant-based rental assistance for homeless, $35,000 for security deposit program for the homeless, $80,000 for Habitat. So all of those programs together basically uses what I have left to allocate for programs and activities.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Randy, in regard to your program, you mentioned moderate income families. What is a moderate income family?
Actually, both programs are a little bit different. The block grant program, the primary objective is we have to use the funds to benefit people that are 80% and below. 80% below median family income. We actually try to use the dollars to target that to families that are below 50% to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, when we get into the neighborhood revitalization program, the reality is if you're going to target 50% and below, it probably wouldn't work. So that program in itself is probably, I think if I looked historically, the families have probably been around that 60 to 70% of the median family income.
And what would that be?
Dwight, can you help me out here on that? I can't tell you. It's based on a sliding scale,
sure.
And it's a whole chart of numbers depending on where it's at. And it seems to me that the 100% of the median family income is somewhere around $60,000 plus or minus $2,000. But
Councilor, okay. Any other questions on this section before we go to public parking? Anything else on community development from any of you? Okay.
Public parking. The mission for public parking is to improve the safety, convenience, and aesthetic appearance of the public parking system. And when we look at the 2007-2008 budget comparison, you can see that our expenditures are up about 4.5% and revenue is up about 4.3%. The thing that and then also the net change down below for 2008, we've got about $53,000 line item there, and that really represents net operating income. That number by itself is not adequate. To comply with the bond requirements, I have to maintain a 1.25 ratio of net operating income over the debt service. So that number I actually have to be working at to be closer to about $150,000. And the only way that I'm going to achieve that is if our revenue goes up, and if that doesn't go up, then I'm going to have to cut the expense side, which will be basically meaning less repair and maintenance activities on the lots and ramps. The revenue increase that you see there at 4.3%, the majority of that for 2008 is actually as a result of the additional leased occupancy that we've had over the last 12 months. We have literally added about 199 additional leases over the last 12 months, so we are system-wide at about 103% leased. I guess, yeah, go on. Can I give you an idea where the revenue breakdown is with public parking? About 13% of it comes from parking meters, 13% from fines, and about 70% of it is from our lease parking fees. The expenditure breakdown, we've got 5.4% for personnel increase, 5.4% increase for personnel expenditures. Operating expenses up about 4%, and the majority of that actually comes from two specific areas. One is related to increase in our energy costs, particularly for our lighting and the parking ramps. And the second one is that we've increased from $5,000 to $30,000 in professional services to provide for annual inspection of the ramps to make sure that we don't have any structural issues that may be going on with those. And the last time we actually had an in-depth study of the ramps was done in 2002. Purpose is to provide public parking to meet the current demand and to maintain the existing facilities in a manner which addresses safety, convenience, and the aesthetic appearance. The goals is to maintain compliance with the current bond obligations. I just mentioned that. Again, we have that 1.25 of net operating income over debt service. Also to build a reserve fund to pay for repair and maintenance activities, and then the last being to prepare for future parking demand. Our action plan will be to begin the implementation of the recommendations that were compiled by Walker Parking Consultants. And three specific items will be to increase the operating income, and that will probably be done through various increases through our fees that we have within the system. We'll also try to work on establishing a sinking fund that will allow us to have the revenue in place so that we can, again, do the repair and maintenance activities when those do come up. And the last item is that we'll continue to explore potential sites for future parking demand. Notable activities, and again, even with this, these are actually things that are underway in 2007, but really will affect the operations more so in 2008. First one is the elimination of the parking lot north of the library, which is going to be eliminated to facilitate the building expansion. The addition of the new parking lot on the old Acme site and 7th Street lot that we actually will be putting out, or is actually out for bids currently. And then also the addition of the new parking lot north of the 8th and Coda ramp, which should be under construction within the next few weeks. Any questions on public parking?
Any questions at all on public parking? Okay, and I think you're...
I was in charge here on the median family income that we'll pass out to the council members. For a family of 4, median income, Dwight McElhaney with Community Development. For a family of 4, median income in Sioux Falls, and this is established by HUD, is $61,700. And so for most of our programs to be eligible, you'd have to be at 80% of that for a family of 4, which would be $50,250. I'll
Right.
give you the chart here.
Right, thank you very much for running after that material for all of us. Any questions? Okay, we are going to, Randy, thank you very much for your work for us every day. And I'd just like to remind the listening audience that we will be back here tomorrow evening at 6:30. We will start promptly on time for the end of our annual budget hearings. And I would also like to remind all of you that all of our 3 days of budget hearings will be rebroadcast on Friday, August 10th, starting at 8 a.m., and again on Sunday morning at 8 a.m., August 12th, if you've missed any of our hearings during the week. So again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate everyone